Hey, what's up? It's cute Watif. This side. Today we will be seeing what if Bakugou had dark past. Now before we move ahead with the FIC, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future Watifs like this. Prologue: the creation of Bakugou Katsuki. I look in the mirror and I hate what I see. Contrary to popular belief, Katsuki Bakugou wasn't always so angry. Kaminari likes to joke about Katsuki's temper, saying how he must have come out of his mother wearing his trademark scowl. Katsuki will always yell back at him, threaten his untimely demise and pop off a few sparks in his face, and then simply continue with whatever he was doing beforehand once Kaminari is sufficiently cowed. But he never denies it. Never denies the fact that his anger is a part of him the same way his love of spicy foods is. Never denies that his fiery temper is simply a facet of his personality. But King Deku knows the truth, and Katsuki knows that he knows every time he catches his eye when Kaminari's teasing him. It never fails to kickstart that godforsaken buzzing in his chest that builds and builds and builds until Katsuki snaps. Because Katsuki wasn't always so angry. Sure, no one would have described him as friendly, and he always had a short fuse, but it wasn't always a permanent state of being. He's always angry because he decided when he was 8 that anger was better than fear and shame and every other repulsive emotion he was unceremoniously introduced to one cold night in December. It's 12:43 a.m. and Katsuki is freezing. His quirk means that he feels the cold far more intensely than the average person, so Katsuki hates winter. Not only is he DMN near defenseless because he's far too cold to sweat, but he can just never seem to stop shivering. He wants to go downstairs and get another blanket, but his face still aches dully from his mother's blow. She's surprisingly strong, and even her slaps make Katsuki's ears ring, and he decides he's fine with what he has. She's in an awful mood tonight, so it's likely that simply existing in the same space as her will make her angry enough to swing at him. He's not scared or anything, he just doesn't want any of his city teachers, or worse, City Deku, asking about any bruises his mother is perfectly capable of gifting him. He wills his body to relax, to sleep, because God knows he'll need to be well rested to deal with the annoying fly that is Izuku Midoriya. His dad is out for company drinks, which is why his mother is in such a bad mood. She was yelling when he left, screaming something about filthy whores and you cheating bstrd, which are words Katsuki doesn't really understand yet, but he knows they're mean from his mother's tone of voice. She always uses that tone of voice when she speaks to him, after all. Katsuki is finally drifting off when he hears his bedroom door creak open, and then heavy, slightly stumbling footsteps entering. Katsuki tries to say, sitting up to greet the figure of his dad, but he's cut off by a sweaty, large hand clamping over his mouth. Kit Kat, slurs his dad, almost crooning the words, and Katsuki feels a strange sense of foreboding creep into his subconscious. Don't wake your mom. And with that, he crawls onto Katsuki's bed, hands sliding from his mouth down. Katsuki is frozen with fear. He doesn't understand. His father's hands roam over his body, pinching and squeezing, too dry and yet clammy with cold sweat, and Katsuki is frozen. His father guides Katsuki's own hand, which is trembling ever so slightly. Katsuki notes with detached interest forward until Katsuki can feel the material of his father's work trousers, and then brings his hand up, until his hand is pressed between his father's legs, touching something that is soft and strong and very, very warm. Yeah, Kat, his father grunts quietly, voice strained, and Katsuki suddenly feels like he needs a shower. His skin feels itchy, like when he'd been playing in the woods and had fallen into the mud and he'd been covered from head to toe with dirt, the sound of a zipper. The rustling of clothes. And when his father's hand guides Katsuki's back to where it was, there is no barrier of clothes anymore. Katsuki's hand wraps around his father, his fingers don't touch, no matter how tightly Katsuki squeezes to make them, and his father groans again, louder, and Katsuki wants a shower so badly his father's hand leads Katsuki in his movements, and Katsuki tries to focus on the repetition up, down, twist, and not on his father's heavy breathing or on the hot, strong flesh between his fingers or how he kind of wants to throw up. An unfamiliar prickling feeling washes over his skin, burrows deep into his heart and settles there, and it takes Katsuki a moment to place it. Shame. And when his father murmurs, "FCK, Kat, let me feel that mouth of yours," and pushes his head down, Katsuki discovers the ice-cold chills of a new feeling trailing up his spine. Fear. When Katsuki picks himself up off the floor, knees aching and throat raw, his father is gone and the door shut. He can almost pretend that what happened didn't happen if it wasn't for the thick taste coating his tongue and the acidic curling of shame in his stomach. He sprints to the bathroom and retches over the toilet, eyes burning. So good, Katsuki FCK, just like your mother, curled up and on the bathroom floor, Katsuki finally lets himself cry. When Katsuki makes his way down the stairs the next morning, eyes heavy with exhaustion and far wearier than any 8-year-old's eyes should have the right to be, he spots his father sitting at the kitchen table. Katsuki holds his breath, but his father doesn't even look at him, so he creeps into the kitchen and heads to the fridge. A foot stuck out to trip him on his way reminds him of the parent he's used to defending himself against. Not even going to greet your mother, brat? Mitsuki's voice is grating and loud in the previously quiet kitchen, and it shatters the illusion of father and son completely avoiding each other like so much fine ice. Mornin', Katsuki mutters, steadfastly avoiding eye contact with both parents, his mother, because she'll undoubtedly take it as some kind of insult to her authority, like a particularly nasty Rottweiler, and his father, because he doesn't want to know what he'll see in them. Good morning, Kit Kat, just like that, Kit Kat. Suddenly Katsuki isn't hungry anymore. Mornin', old man, he says, unable to look the man in the eye or address him the way he did just yesterday. He feels like a coward, but he just can't do it. Ah, Kat, you're too cool to call your father dad now? I see how it is, don't worry, his father says, sounding completely normal, as if nothing had changed, as if right now speaking to him didn't make Katsuki want to claw his skin off. Why did you do that to me? Katsuki wants to scream. Why did you touch me like that? I don't understand, what does it mean? Why do I feel so terrible? But he says nothing, and leaves the house into the biting December air, feeling the now familiar feelings of shame and confusion and fear curling at the base of his spine. But Katsuki doesn't feel shame or confusion, and definitely not fear. The future #1 hero doesn't have time to be weak or afraid. So Katsuki digs deep for something else to feel to hide away his vulnerability. He'll never show weakness again. He finds something quite promising in the furthest reaches of his heart, past the humiliation and the fear and the little boy's voice asking, what did I do to deserve this? He finds anger. Bakugou, the boy with a temper as explosive as his quirk, is born. And Katsuki hides behind the wall of rage and buries his confusion and shame and fear somewhere deep down inside of him. It's ironic, really, that his wall starts being broken down when he's finally chasing his dream of being the best, the strongest hero the world has ever seen. Tell me why did you do this to me? What did I do to deserve it? The worst day of Bakugou's life, quite an impressive feat considering, starts off deceptively well. The hag doesn't drag him out of bed by the hair for one, and it's a morning free from the aftermath of his father's nightly visits for another. A good sign, as far as Bakugou's concerned. He creeps silently down the stairs, despite what any of his teachers would say. Bakugou can do quiet, and he can do it very well. It's made his mornings infinitely better. If he doesn't wake his parents, they won't be able to ruin his day before it even begins. Ironclad F-King logic right there. The first sign that something is wrong is that the kitchen lights are on. Bakugou's heart drops somewhere to the vicinity of his ankles when he takes in the sight of both his parents up before him on a Thursday F-King morning. Motherfucker. He forgoes being quiet and dredges his anger up from his stomach. It's not strong, with the nauseating visuals supplied to him, his mother cooking while his father sits at a table set for two. Mornin', old man, hag, he bites out, fully prepared for the smack sent his way by his mother and dodging it with practiced ease. God, Katsuki, would it kill you not to be a piece of shit for one day? His mother snaps, the illusion of a perfect family scene ruined by the intrusion of her son. No can do, hag, he quips, and this time he's not fast enough to dodge the blow, and a fist cracks into his cheekbone, sending him into the kitchen counter with surprising force for this time of the morning. He snarls, readying a scathing comment to shoot back at her, when he hears the SC of a chair from behind him. FCK, F-King FCK. He knows better than to talk back to his mother with his father in the room. He King knows better, so why did his father comes up behind him, caging him against the kitchen counter under the pretense of leaning over to see the food his mother is cooking. He feels his father press up against his back and feels, on his lower back it's strong and hot, and Katsuki doesn't know what to do when he feels it against him, doesn't understand what's happening when his father presses him face first into the sheets and holds him there. Oh God. Bakugou feels the bile rise in his throat when his father settles gentle hands on his hips and leans down to whisper in his ear, "Be good, Katsuki, so good for me, Kit Kat FCK off, old man." He nearly shouts, shoving him away as strong as he dares. He gets a hit to the face that sends him to the floor for that one, his mother's face strong and angry as she brandishes a frying pan. "How dare you talk to your father like that, Katsuki?" She screams, and brings the pan down so suddenly that Bakugou doesn't even think to raise his hands. It hits him strong in the stomach and he hisses in pain, glaring up at his mother from where she's begun a rant. Such a King disappointment, wanted a King girl, and then, something she said a few times, but that never fails to spear right through his defenses and straight into his traitorously soft, vulnerable heart that still lives to make his parents proud. "Why don't you just jump off the roof and do us all a King favor?" Bakugou can't stand to stay on the floor any longer, so he leaps up and shoves his way to the door, trying his best to ignore the acidic words being spat at him. King failure, Katsuki. Even though he slams the door as strong as he can, he still doesn't feel like he's won. He never does when it's his parents. That's why it's all the more important to win everywhere else. He's gotta cancel out the weakness he displays at home somehow. Maybe he'll beat on City Deku some today. The quirkless nerd has the King audacity to want to be a pro hero when he's never trained a day in his life. God, Katsuki may be weak, but at least he works strong, harder than anyone else. Deku's just pathetic. It fills the hollow inside him just slightly to be the one spitting venom rather than hearing it for once. He learned his particular brand of cruelty at his mother's knee after all. Why don't you go jump off the roof and hope for a quirk in your next life? Bakugou snarls, but even as he says it, the sick pleasure that usually rises in him when he puts Deku in his place gives way to an icy emptiness that fills every crack and crevice of his body. Big, hurt green eyes look up at him and the emptiness grows colder. When did he become his mother? The thought jars him, and regret spreads like mold on the surface of his tongue. He doesn't know how to form the words of an apology, but doesn't get the chance to even try. The bell rings, and Bakugou leaves the classroom in a haze, ignoring Deku and ignoring the posse that hangs around him. "I don't want to become my mother." Bakugou can't breathe. The sludge villain pours itself down his throat, cackling all the while, and Bakugou can't breathe. Katsuki can't breathe. His father's voice is gentle above him, but his hand is firm on the back of his neck, pushing him further and further and further down, and Katsuki can't breathe. Bakugou sets off explosions as much as he can, fighting to get away, and he sees through the haze of his terror a group of people at the end of the alley. Just standing there. Watching him suffer. Pro-heroes are there too, he realizes with a sick jolt of something, and they're not doing anything. Katsuki's attention is drawn by light. He looks towards the door, tries to pull away, but his father's hand stays firm and he pushes Katsuki down until he chokes. His mother is standing in the doorway, shadow illuminated by the hall light, and for once Katsuki is happy to see her. But she stands there, doing nothing, watching him jiji and choke, and Bakugou manages to open his eyes, and to his horror, makes eye contact with Deku. Regret claws its way up his throat and settles there alongside the sludge, prying open his mouth and the acrid taste of fear. And then Deku is moving, running towards him, and Bakugou wants to scream at him to get away. "What the FCK are you doing?" But Deku reaches him, cries, "You looked like you needed help," Kakin, eyes brimming with stupid city tears, and tries to help him. Bakugou feels worthless when he realizes that Deku is the only one who cares again. Katsuki is watching cartoons, his father seated beside him. They both pretend not to notice the hand creeping upwards on Katsuki's thigh. Katsuki vaguely thinks that he wants to die, maybe, or just throw up and have a shower, when his father abandons pretense and settles a firm hand between Katsuki's legs, nudging at his inner thighs with his knuckles to get him to spread them more. Katsuki's breath hitches, and heat curls low in his belly, and he feels so completely and utterly bad. The doorbell rings, his mother shouts that it's Izuku-chan. And Katsuki is saved when All Might blasts the villain out of him. Bakugou collapses to the ground. His mind bungee jumps between past and present, and he fights not to throw up in front of his idol and his victim? Childhood friend? Are you all right, young Midoriya? The booming voice echoes in Bakugou's ears. Ah, he thinks, of course. Why would he bother asking the guy pathetic enough to get himself trapped by that excuse of a villain, when Deku, the quirkless hero, is right F-king there? He gets up and leaves quietly, throat raw and burning in a way that is intimately familiar and also jarringly different. Oh God, he's so pathetic. Needing to be saved by Deku? Someone who'd probably never done a push-up in their life, someone who prattled on about his dreams but did nothing to reach them? Bakugou wants to be sick. In fact, he thinks he might be. Bakugou retches over the toilet bowl, 2 fingers down his throat as he desperately tries to empty the contents of his stomach, just in case he managed to ingest some of that disgusting slime. Katsuki throws up into the toilet until he's sure that it's all out of his stomach, crying salty tears that blend into the salt on his tongue and leave him a pathetic heap on the cold tiles. He steps into the shower and leans his head forward to rest against the cold wall, watching dark green slime swirl in the water before escaping down the drain. He's so tired of being weak. Katsuki cries in the shower, legs trembling as he fights to stay upright because he knows that sitting will be a lot more painful than standing is, and watches red and white swirl in the water to become pink before being sucked away by the drain. Bakugou makes a promise to himself, one he's made so many times before. I'll never be weak again, he thinks, and laughs. It's dry and derisive and exactly like his mother. It hurts on the way out. Things will be different at UA, he thinks, knows. He'll be so strong that no one will dare mess with him. He'll show his mother. He'll show his father. He'll show everyone. He's going to be the #1 hero, and he won't let anything, least of all his own weakness, stop him from getting there. What's the point in life if it's just survival? Based on a sample size of 37 seconds, Bakugou could already tell you that UA was batshit crazy, a conclusion drawn entirely from their entrance exam. Giant robots? Cliché as anything, but pretty DMN cool, nevertheless. Bakugou let himself fall into his battle mindset, which was his favorite state to be in, honestly. Fear, apprehension, hesitation, they became foreign entities. All that mattered was the fight he needed to win and the adrenaline racing through his veins. Sometimes Katsuki would lie in his bed at night, breath held tight in his chest, ears straining for the distinctive sound of heavy, stumbling footsteps, and he'd wish that he could be in that mindset 247. What he'd give to never have to be afraid again. A brief thought flashed through Bakugou's mind, a quick, how does that quirkless nerd think he can make it into UA if this is the entrance exam? But it was gone as soon as it appeared, his fighting mindset deeming it irrelevant to furthering his success rate. Bakugou let his explosions propel him up, 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 and surveyed the wreckage of the robots beneath him. 7 down in 3 minutes? Not good enough, came a voice inside his head, you have to do better than that. Gritting his teeth in agreement, Bakugou enjoyed the wind on his face for one more second, breathing in the unbeatable taste of freedom, before he rocketed himself back down to Earth to find more robots to destroy. First. He came first in the entrance exam for one of the top hero schools in the country. Katsuki knew coming first was the bare minimum, something expected of him, nothing to brag about, but still, the little boy inside him who'd wanted to be a hero ever since he saw All Might fight was screeching with joy, and it felt really, really good. And All Might, the #1 hero, was going to be teaching them. Bakugou felt something pulling at the corner of his lips. He brought his hand up to feel for what it was, and was shocked to discover that it was a smile. A real, genuine smile. God, when was the last time he'd smiled because of happiness? He smiled while fighting all the time, but that really wasn't the same. This smile he couldn't seem to get rid of. It made his chest feel weirdly light and floaty and made his permanently tense shoulders relax. Bakugou let the smile grow wider, and an airy laugh escaped him. He clapped a hand over his mouth, eyes wide with surprise. Sure, smiling was one thing, not exactly monumental, but laughing? He could count on one hand the amount of times he'd laughed in his whole life, and most of those were mocking, directed at Deku, intended to be hurtful. This was a very new feeling to Bakugou, and he decided to lock it away behind his rage, keep it in his heart for when he felt especially silly. Kit Kat? Came a voice from the door, amused and deceptively light. Bakugou felt all the tension rush straight back into his body, brain belatedly sending a message of sick apprehension down his spine. FCK. He'd let down his guard. You came first, Katsuki? Well done, said his father, crossing his room in heavy strides, settling a warm hand on his shoulder. Bakugou, once again, like the countless times before, could do nothing but endure. My clever boy. His father's hand crept lower, lingering at his chest, before moving lower still. Bakugou stayed stock still, frozen, heart jackrabbiting in his chest, keeping his breathing steady through sheer force of will. Panic blared in his mind, and he tried to scream at himself, scream at his traitorous body that was F-King reacting to the hand. FCK, push him away, he yelled desperately, run away, get away, but he couldn't move. Despite him now being more than capable of physically overpowering his father, it felt like the moment he touched him he was 8 years old again, cold and so very confused. Bakugou hated how vulnerable, how pathetic he became when his father was around. Katsuki, what's this? You naughty boy. His father's voice crooned in his ear as he wrapped his hand around Katsuki through his pajama trousers, and Bakugou squeezed his eyes shut. Maybe, if he could just pretend that this wasn't happening, that Bakugou wasn't weak enough to let this happen, then his father slipped his hand inside his trousers and Bakugou wanted to die, even as he gasped quietly and felt the heat in his belly coil tighter. That's my boy, Kat. So cute for me, his father whispered, and Bakugou felt hot tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. Bakugou sat there, doing his best to pretend that the body being touched, the body enjoying his father's hand wasn't, in fact, his. He didn't want this body to be his, he hated it. The heat in his stomach coiled tighter and tighter, until Bakugou had to bite his lip strong enough to draw BLD to keep the humiliating sounds firmly inside his throat. The coil eventually snapped, and Bakugou's back arched without permission, a choked-off whine escaping from between his teeth, and his father withdrew his hand, wiping it on Bakugou's all-might pajama shirt. His favorite, cried the little boy inside him, and Bakugou could hear the smirk in his father's voice when he said, "Return the favor, Katsuki." Numbly, feeling as substantial as a ghost, Bakugou let his father guide him off his desk chair and onto his knees. He felt the familiar prickling of shame and fear roiling in his stomach, mixed with the lingering arousal from his disgusting body, when he heard the familiar sound of a zipper being opened. Such a good slot, Katsuki. Bakugou wanted to die. Privately, Bakugou thought, his first day at UA couldn't have gone worse. He'd emptied the last of his concealer to cover the bruise on his cheekbone, courtesy of his beloved mother, meaning he just had to pray to F-King Jesus that no one would notice the fingerprint bruises around his wrists. He really wasn't in the mood to create an excuse that would explain those away. Then, lo and behold, he'd walked into the classroom, Class 1A, only to come face to face with F-King Deku. How in the ever-loving FCK had he passed that entrance exam without a quirk? Bakugou got his answer in the quirk apprehension test when he watched the nerd break a F-King finger using a quirk that Bakugou knew he couldn't possibly have, and throw the DM in further than Bakugou did. Now, while Bakugou's anger had started off as a shield, it was quite difficult to be an a-hole all the time and not adopt some mannerisms as personality traits. So, on the rare occasions when something actually, properly enraged Bakugou, he lost control of himself. Meaning, Bakugou saw red. When his rational brain decided to check back in, he found himself trapped inside some type of gray scarf. His teacher, Aizawa Shoyuda, an underground hero, supplied the fanboy inside him, had him trapped and his quirk erased. He locked eyes with Deku to see the wilting flower looking like Bakugou had just murdered his puppy right in front of him, or a nauseating mixture of sadness and the tiniest little spark of anger. Bakugou just narrowed his eyes at him, sending the most ferocious, "I'm going to tear out your spine and use it as a spit to roast the rest over your body parts over a fire," glare he could possibly muster. Deku flinched away. "Good. Learn to control your temper, Bakugou," said Aizawa in the driest, most monotone voice he'd ever heard. It was almost impressive how few FCKs he seemed to give. Bakugou just sneered at him. Apparently Aizawa was also a DMN liar, because F-King Deku hadn't gotten expelled even though he'd come last in the DMN test. Bakugou stayed mad about that all through his journey home, used it as a defense against his mother at large, and carried the anger into the next day as well. He was a bit impressed with himself, honestly. Usually, trying to stay angry for so long exhausted him, but he only felt invigorated by it. He was determined to tear Deku a whole new a-hole for even daring to look down on him for their entire childhood. How dare he keep this strength quirk a secret even while Bakugou was beating on him? Did he think him so weak? But that plan was promptly derailed when Bakugou had the displeasure of interacting with his classmates. Hi! I'm Kirishima Aijuru. It's so cool to properly meet the guy that came first in the entrance exam. Red spiky hair, bright eyes, and an even brighter smile. Bakugou promptly shut down every observational thought apart from factual statements in order to somehow forget the fact that this guy was really good looking. Mother F-Ker. Couldn't his brain be normal for one goddamn second? Out of my way, city hair. Who even are you anyway? He snapped angrily, but instead of leaving him alone, the idiot just smiled brighter. Yo, that's kinda rude, you know. I came second in the entrance exam, and, also my hair's not that different to yours. Bakugou squinted at him. Second in the entrance exam? Before sighing and grunting, Bakugou Katsuki. Now FCK off. To his surprise, Kirishima's city hair actually backed off, smile still annoyingly intact, with a parting gift of, cool, talk to you later then, bro. Bro? What the FCK? Before Bakugou could dissect and examine every second of that brief interaction that could have indicated to city hair that Bakugou was the type of guy who you could call bro and then never do it again, the classroom door opened. An unbelievably short guy who looked like a bunch of GS walked in, and he immediately jumped up on the teacher's desk. Before he even drew breath to speak, Bakugou knew he wasn't going to like what he heard. DMN ladies. Looking hot, looking CC. The guy practically yelled, his beady eyes roving across the bodies of every girl currently in the room. They all looked immensely uncomfortable, but the guy didn't seem to care. I mean, hot DMN, you've got some great tips, the lot of you. I'm a very lucky mondash. Bakugou cut him off with a punch to the stomach. He knew exactly why he hated this guy now. The way he'd practically undressed the girls with his eyes reminded Bakugou of how his father looked at him. It never failed to make him feel dirtier than the ground he walked on, so he wasn't about to let this asswipe get away with making people he didn't even know feel like that. How about, Bakugou said quietly, dangerously, in the voice he reserved only for a-holes he was really mad at, and I mean this quite sincerely, you shut the FCK up and leave them alone, huh? The guy was coughing on the ground, holding his stomach, but Bakugou felt exactly no guilt at all. "Why?" the guy spluttered, getting his breath back and clearly not understanding the threat an irate Bakugou posed, "You jealous or something?" Bakugou opened his mouth to snap back at him, but the guy's next words made him want to sink into the ground and disappear. "'Cause I don't swing that way or anything, but, like, are you sure you're not a girl? With those tips? You have such a nice body, Katsuki, just like your mother, boom." The guy howled in fear at the explosion that Bakugou had set off entirely involuntarily mere inches from his face. "Come near me again and I'll set you on fire," he growled, shoving his hands in his pockets to hide the tremors running through them and cursing every god in existence for the tightness of the UA uniform shirts. Before anyone could say anything, Aizawa lumbered into the classroom, looking like a dead man that had just recently exited his coffin. Honestly, Bakugou understood. After class was over, Bakugou practically employed the glasses guy's quirk with how fast he tried to exit the classroom. Not fast enough, unfortunately, to avoid the twin assault of red and pink that approached him with matching grins on their faces. "Bakugou! That was so manly of you, calling my Netta out on his behavior like that." Kirishima beamed at him, moving towards him as if he wanted to hug him or something ridiculous like that. Bakugou moved back slightly and tensed, waiting for it. But, to his surprise, the red idiot just took in his stiff posture and stepped back to give him space. Bakugou was so thrown by that turn of events that he missed what the alien-looking chick said. "The FCK, did you say, raccoon eyes?" Her black eyes widened in surprise. "Raccoon eyes." Understanding dawned on her pink face. "Raccoon eyes. 'Cause my eyes are black." "Man, Kiri, you weren't exaggerating about his nicknames." Bakugou just stood there nonplussed. Nicknames? He just didn't know what her actual F-King name was. "I said, thank you for punching my netta in the stomach. I'm sure all the girls feel the same. I mean, we were a little surprised, since you seemed like a bit of a DCK, but it's nice to know that even you aren't a creep like that guy." "Even you?" What the FCK was that supposed to mean? TCH, whatever. Especially since, so many guys treat girls differently and, don't respect us as much as dudes, and it's so annoying. First of all, raccoon eyes, get a better F-King vocabulary and stop saying and second, F-King obviously it's annoying, 'cause it's F-King stupid. I don't do that sit. Doesn't matter if you're a girl or a dude or whatever, I F-King disrespect everyone equally, Bakugou grunted. City Hair and Alien Beach looked at him for a long second. Bakugou immediately regretted saying so much. FCK, what had happened to his promise of being the best? He was losing time that could be spent studying talking to these lunatics. Then said lunatics started to howl with laughter. Bakugou just stood there, feeling deeply confused and angry about it. He hated not knowing what was going on, and right now he had no F-King clue. "Oi, dumbass, stop F-King laughing at me," he growled, feeling slightly shaky and growing even madder to beat the feeling down. "We're not laughing at you, bro, don't worry," said Kirishima in between chuckles, "you're just a funny guy." That didn't make Bakugou any less confused. With a non-committal grunt, he left them to their hyena laughter and made his way home. He couldn't afford to lose any more time. By the end of the first week, Bakugou had acquired both a uniform 2 sizes too large for him in order to avoid drawing attention to his body, and, strangely, the phone numbers of Pink Idiot and Red Dumbass. He didn't know why he kept their numbers. He should have just deleted them. His first ever contacts apart from his sit parents in his phone. But he didn't. And that made all the difference. Who can you trust when everyone wants to see you fail? To say Bakugou was in a permanent state of confusion nowadays would only be stretching the truth slightly. Sometime after the mess that was USJ, the Red Dumbass had elevated himself to City Hair, and had firmly entrenched himself in Bakugou's life without the latter really noticing. At USJ, Bakugou had been forced, quite reluctantly, to acknowledge that despite his complete and utter lack of brain cells, Kirishima City Hair was a pretty capable fighter with a mean left jab. Kirishima had then, afterwards, proceeded to talk to him, walk to class with him, throw a friendly arm around his shoulders, and for some reason, Bakugou felt no urge to knee him in the solar plexus. Truly very confusing. It only got more confusing on one seemingly normal Tuesday. Bakugou was fishing his bento box out of his bag, preparing to eat lunch alone in the classroom like he always did, when Kirishima came striding up to his desk, his typical bright smile on his face. "Yo, Baku bro!" And that was something quite new as well. Bakugou had a personal vendetta against nicknames, but, strangely, this one didn't make him want to tear his skin off. Quite the opposite, actually. It made him feel warm. "I was just wondering if you wanted to eat lunch with the squad in the cafeteria today." Kirishima beamed at him, and Bakugou felt that he almost had to avert his gaze so he wouldn't be blinded. "What F-Kin squad?" Then Bakugou saw pink, yellow, and black hovering in the doorway, vaguely apprehensive looks on their faces as they surveyed him and Kirishima. Bakugou felt the urge to glare at them. FCK, he knew he had a reputation, all right? That first battle exam against Deco hadn't done him any favors. He'd gained the truly wonderful moniker the Beast of Class 1A, and this nickname did, in fact, make him want to tear his skin off. All he'd wanted to do in that first exam was prove that even if Deku had truly been mocking him secretly all this time, it didn't mean a DMN thing about Bakugou's own strength. He'd wanted to prove to himself, to the whole class of extras watching, that he was strong. Stronger than Deku, stronger than anyone strong enough to be the next number one. And instead he'd failed. Failed because Deku had probably filled 2 entire city notebooks about Bakugou and his quirk and his fighting style. Deku had read him like a book. And that hurt. Because it showed that no matter how many times he'd told Deku to FCK off, to leave him alone, to go the FCK away, no matter how many times he'd heard him to make him listen, Deku still hadn't. He'd never understood that, not really. Whenever his mother beat him for making a mistake, he made sure never to do it again. But when he shoved Deku onto the ground and said mean things to him, Deku didn't learn from his mistake. Deku just cried those stupid big tears of his, looked at Bakugou like he'd just betrayed him, and kept following him. Kept trying to talk to him, to hang around him, kept asking if he was okay. "Where did you get those bruises, Kakin? Are you okay, Kakin? Did Auntie Mitsuki do that?" Bakugou had never understood Deku. And that scared him. Just a little bit. Bakugou hated not understanding. Hated being confused. "Fkin fine," Bakugou muttered, feeling very tired all of a sudden. "Hell yeah, bro!" Kirishima cheered, seeming genuinely happy that Bakugou had accepted his offer once again, confusing as hell. The redhead hauled Bakugou up by the arm, the latter immediately smacking Kirishima's shoulder to make him let go. Yes, Kirishima's touch was acceptable, but that didn't mean that Bakugou was going to invite it. "The FCK are you so excited about, dumbass?" Bakugou grunted, ignoring the surprise on the faces of the group stood by the doorway. "You've never eaten with us before, Bakugou. It's an exciting moment." "Whatever, idiot," with a sigh that held a disturbing amount of fondness rather than the resignation he'd been aiming for, Bakugou let himself be herded towards the cafeteria, surrounded by idiots that were somehow just as loud and cheerful as Kirishima himself. He'd never felt so out of place before. "So, Bakugou, are you looking forward to the sports festival?" Bakugou looked up from his spicy curry to meet the eyes of the yellow idiot Kaminari, his memory supplied, and felt determination rise up inside him. "Of Fkin course, Pikachu, I'm gonna win. Not just win indisputably, completely and totally. Rise up so high that no one, not his mother, not his father, not City Deku, could ever tear him down again. He was going to be the best. The best." "Pikachu?" cried Kaminari, a look of disbelieving indignation on his face that Bakugou, with no small amount of glee, ignored. "That's so manly, bro!" Kirishima practically yelled, and, in retrospect, it was fking obvious that the guy wanted to smack him on the back. It was so fking obvious, but the hand was too fast, too sudden, and all Bakugou could see for a split second was his mother's fist hurtling towards him, and his body reacted purely on instinct. He flinched. Squeezed his eyes shut. Braced himself. When no hit came, his brain finally copped on that this was stupid Kirishima, basically a golden Labrador of a boy that probably felt guilty if he swatted a fly, and he managed to force his body back into a pose that hopefully came across as casual. One look at Kirishima's face told him he hadn't succeeded. Though the entire interaction from Kirishima's aborted back slap to him righting himself couldn't have taken more than 3 seconds, those moments were clearly enough for Kirishima to suspect something. FCK. FCK. He was such a F-king idiot. "Bakubro, shut the FCK up," hissed Bakugou, with far more venom than he'd meant to inject the words with, and Kirishima froze, hurt mingling with the look of pity on his face. It had to be pity, after all. He must think Bakugou weak, must be looking down on him for reacting like a little beach to something innocent like that. It had to be pity. Right? Bakugou stood up and strode away, telling himself that it wasn't a retreat, it wasn't, but the way he sped up when he heard Kirishima call his name said the opposite. The way he avoided Kirishima like the plague only proved it. Bakugou managed to evade Kirishima for a whole week. And then the sports festival happened, and with it, the end of Bakugou's life as he knew it. Learned helplessness is not really learned at all, it is taught. As Bakugou stretched to prepare himself for his first match against Gravity Girl, he couldn't stop his brain from remembering what Kirishima had told him at the cavalry battle. "I'll be your unshakable steed, Bakugou." And he had been. They'd worked well together. But Bakugou still remembered that suspicion on Kirishima's face. The pity. He couldn't let anyone look at him like that. Couldn't give anyone a reason to. He was here to become the #1 hero. To prove to himself that he could do it. To prove to his mother that he could do it. To prove to his father that he was more than he used him for. He wasn't here to make friends. Friends were a weakness he couldn't afford. He had far too much to gain and far too much to lose. It didn't matter that Kirishima's friendly touch didn't make his skin crawl. Didn't matter that Kirishima's nickname Bakubro made him feel weirdly, pleasantly warm. It didn't matter. He wasn't here to make friends, after all. He was here to win. Not like this, Bakugou thought, desperately, as he ran to where the icy hot BSTRD lay unmoving atop his own ice. Not like this. This wasn't the win, the indisputable win he'd wanted. This wasn't a win he could be proud of. He had to keep fighting, he had to wake Icy Hot up so they could continue, he had to win properly. He had to. Or he wasn't proving anything at all. Wake up! Wake up, you Icy Hot BSTRD. Keep fighting me. I won't win like this. I won't. Get up, damn it. And then all Bakugou could see was a purple mist, and midnight striding towards them, WHP cracking, and then, just before the black at the corners of his vision enveloped him completely, he heard her declare, "Todoroki is out of bounds. Bakugou wins." No, not like this. When he wakes up, Midnight and Cementos stand at the foot of the bed, scrutinizing him with apprehension. He glares at them and hauls himself out of bed, intending to go to the roof for a little while so he can stew in his bitter disappointment by himself before he has to go home and confront his mother. "Where do you think you're going, young man?" "The award ceremony starts in a couple of minutes," says Midnight, and Bakugou can barely suppress his disbelief when he turns to look at her. "You can't seriously believe that I'm going to accept that F-King medal? You saw that fight. I didn't F-King win properly, so I'm not taking the medal. FCK no. Give it to the Icy Hot BSTRD or something. I don't F-King want it." He spits with vitriol and heads towards the door again, completely missing the look of agreement Midnight and Cementos share. "I'm afraid what you want isn't as important as this ceremony, Bakugou," is all the warning Bakugou gets before purple mist fills his vision once more. He really should have known. He doesn't struggle against the darkness overcoming his vision. Doesn't try to hold his breath. His father has taught him all too well that when other people need something from him, what Bakugou wants rarely comes into the equation. But still, he can't help the icy curl of betrayal settling around his heart. He'd thought that maybe UA would be different, had thought that surely his teachers would be better than his parents. They were pro-heroes, after all. Clearly not. No one ever cares what Bakugou wants. What he wants, how he feels, it doesn't matter. "I just said no," echoes the voice of a scared, confused 8-year-old boy inside him. "I just said no." But that didn't ever stop his father, and it sure as hell didn't stop anyone now. When Bakugou wakes, his first reaction is panic. Because he's chained up so tightly against a pole that he can't move, his hands are weighed down and bound by heavy-duty cork restraints, and there's a muzzle on his face. The feeling of a muzzle isn't exactly new to Bakugou, nor is the feeling of being restrained, but that doesn't make him any less scared. He buries that feeling, along with the increasingly panicked voice of a little boy begging someone, anyone, to help him, to explain what was happening, to let him go, under a well-worn blanket of rage. It offers no comfort. It rarely does, but he uses it nonetheless. He has nothing else, after all. He screams. Struggles. Feels the sweat pooling in the restraints and hopes someone will come and remember what a f-king stupid idea putting containing cork restraints on an explosion cork is. But no one comes. The room is dark and deserted, and Bakugou's heart feels just as empty. He's alone. Like always. The platform he's on starts rising, and Bakugou struggles harder, screams louder, and prays desperately that his blind terror looks like his carefully cultivated anger. Because he's losing his mind just a little bit. After the Sludge villain, Bakugou's relationship with small spaces went from bad to worse. His brain can't seem to decide whether the chains are Sludge or his mother's bruising grip, whether the muzzle on his face is his father's hand muffling any noises he makes or Sludge forcing its way into his mouth. He's shaking, he knows, and his breathing is quickening and getting shallower, and he needs to get these cork restraints off him now or he's going to burn himself up to his elbows in his panic. Bright lights and deafening noise greets him when he rises above the surface, and as Bakugou whips his head around he sees Icy Hot in second and Bird Boy in third place. They're looking at him with an expression he can't place, but they make no move to free him from the restraints, so Bakugou assumes that it's disgust, or fear, or any other emotion that would make them leave him like this. And Bakugou knows he has a reputation, okay? He really, really knows. That much is clear from the restraints, the muzzle, the way the crowd is screaming at him and no one moves to set him free. But surely this is breaking some kind of law? Or maybe it would be if it were any other classmate. Maybe the fact that it's Bakugou chained up and struggling means it's okay. Bakugou fights, bucking wildly, feeling sparks light up involuntarily on his palms and turn into burning explosions that sear along his forearms, because he hates this. He hates the eyes of everyone on him, this awful, sick feeling of adrenaline with nowhere to go, this feeling of being no more than a dangerous animal put on display. He can hear the crowd, even with his failing hearing, he can hear them, even though he desperately tries to drown them out with his own screams. He's like a wild animal. Are we sure he wants to be a hero? God, he's practically feral, he's dangerous. A villain. How did he get into UA? It hurts. He doesn't want it to, but God, he feels every word like a knife in his lungs, turning his already shallow breathing into stuttering gasps. He thought only his mother could weaponize words like that. Bakugou finds his rage eventually. Because while his mother at least knows him enough to say city things, these people are strangers. They don't know him. They don't know how much he wants to be a hero. They don't know anything. So when All Might, his childhood hero, his favorite hero, cries, a small voice inside him approaches him and takes off the muzzle, he finds the strength to spit at him. I don't want that DMN medal. I haven't f-king earned it and you know it. But All Might just looks at him in disapproval. This is too much, he says, accept this medal, young Bakugou, even if you have to see it as a scar. Use it to keep moving forward. And before Bakugou can tell him again that he can't accept a medal he doesn't deserve, All Might has shoved the medal into his mouth, replacing the muzzle with yet another thing intended to shut him up. Bakugou fumes, and manages, with the muzzle gone, to shove the fear and the panic into the furthest reaches of his mind. When the platform sinks below the ground again, Bakugou's shoulders lose some of their tension. Finally. The eyes on him are gone. He's alone. He stays alone for a while longer, restrained and struggling half-heartedly. He knows it's futile at this point, before all of a sudden the chains spring apart, the restraints on his hands detach, and Bakugou is free. The room remains empty. No one has come to free him, a mechanism on the chains themselves has simply been activated. Bakugou almost laughs. He winces when he tries to wiggle his fingers. His arms are pretty badly burned, and his skin is raw where he fought against the chains. His jaw aches from the muzzle, and his body aches from the sudden uncoiling of the desperate tension of the past minutes. He feels like sit. A glance at the clock tells him he has no time to go to the roof, no time to simply sit by himself and exist. It's time to face his parents. And, to his eternal shame, that scares him far more than that sits-how of an award ceremony. Bakugou's barely inside the door before his mother has a tight hold of his hair and is dragging him into the hallway. Let go of me, hag, Bakugou protests, but it's weak. He's just so tired, and he doesn't want to deal with this right now. He just wants to go to bed and sleep for as long as possible. You pathetic little sit. What the FCK was that at the sports festival? You embarrassed me and your father with that F-King display. Are you F-King crazy? Bakugou tries to pull away, to go upstairs, but his mother is livid, and her grip stays firm and painful. With a sinking feeling, Bakugou realizes it's going to be bad tonight. Very bad. But maybe his mother drags him into the living room, where his father sits, newspaper in hand. Katsuki, says his father, and Bakugou simply cannot bring himself to look him in the eyes. I am very, very disappointed in you. I thought we raised you better than that. The way you acted up there, it was unacceptable. And I'm not saying you're bad, Katsuki, Kit Kat, I'm not, but if you want to be a hero, you should really stop acting so much like a villain. 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 Bakugou wants to shout, to scream that he's not a villain, he's not bad, he's not. But he can't remember how to. It feels like a fog has descended on him. He barely processes his father handing his mother his belt and settling back onto the sofa with the paper. Barely processes his shirt being wrestled off him. Barely process being shoved onto the scratchy, carpeted floor. He does, however, process the all-too-familiar, burning pain lancing across his back when his mother brings the belt down. It hurts. It hurts so bad. But Bakugou deserves this. He acted like a villain. He deserves this punishment. Even though all he did was say no, he should have known better. What he wants doesn't matter. His father taught him that. How could he forget? He deserves this pain. Doesn't he? Much later, when his mother's arm gets too tired to continue, and his father has had his fill, Bakugou crawls into bed, his back screaming at him and his throat hoarse. He knows he should clean the wounds on his back so they don't get infected, knows he should bandage them, knows he needs to wash out his mouth so the taste of salt doesn't send him into a panic attack tomorrow morning. He knows all this. But he's so tired. So he does none of that. He gets into bed and curls up as tightly as his back allows, hugging his teddy bear to his chest. He tries to pretend the teddy bear is a person, and he arranges its arms so that they over Bakugou's shoulders. He tries to pretend that the teddy is hugging him, though he can't remember how a hug works, or what it feels like. Bakugou hugs the teddy bear tighter, buries his face in it, and cries. What is friendship? Does it hurt? Bakugou's not really sure when Kirishima went from someone to be tolerated to a friend. Well, at least Bakugou thinks they're friends. He's never really had any, so he's got nothing to compare it to. But Kirishima proclaims loudly, to anyone in earshot, that Bakugou is his bro, and super manly, and Bakugou thinks that might mean they're friends. He doesn't want to ask, because A, he's not really an emotions guy unless those emotions are anger or aggressive repression, and B, he doesn't know what he'll do if Kirishima says that they're not. Bakugou knows he's not the best at social skills. He's angry and rude and single-mindedly focused on being a hero. And that must make him strong to be around. Plenty of people have told him so, after all. But Kirishima spends time with him. He always asks Bakugou to be his partner in group projects after that first embarrassing occasion when people were suggesting picking straws to see who'd have the misfortune of dealing with Bakugou, and Kirishima volunteered and since recently, goes to Bakugou for help with studying and homework. It's disconcerting because, in Bakugou's 16 years of experience, people are never friendly for no reason. They always want something in return for their kindness. But Bakugou can't figure out what it is that Kirishima wants. And that sets him on edge. Hey Baku bro, thanks for agreeing to help me study. Bakugou just grunts and pushes past Kirishima's beaming smile into his house. Kirishima leads him towards what Bakugou assumes is his room. It's the first time they're studying at Kirishima's house instead of the school library or a cafe, and Bakugou is definitely not nervous, not in the slightest. Except he really is, because he doesn't know the rules of Kirishima's house, and he doesn't know if his parents are in the house, where they are, what their warning signs are, he doesn't know anything. The sweetheart, is this the friend you were telling me about? Bakugou suppresses his flinch through sheer force of will. The woman who'd intercepted them before they reached the stairs is clearly Kirishima's mother. She has his sharp teeth and red eyes, but her hair is black. Bakugou eyes her warily as Kirishima beams at her, saying, "Yeah, Mama, this is Bakugou." "Bakugou, this is one of my moms, the other one is still at work." Bakugou's assessment of all the potential dangers the woman in front of him could pose is halted. "You have two moms, City Hair?" he asks, disbelief coloring his voice. He winces internally at how rude that came across. "Yeah, man. That's not a problem, right?" Though Kirishima is still smiling, there's a certain edge in his eyes when he asks that, telling Bakugou that while it may be easy to forget, what with his Labrador puppy demeanor, Kirishima does actually have a spine, and he's prepared to fight for what he believes in. Bakugou respects that. "Course not, idiot," he mutters, hoping and praying his pale face doesn't give away his embarrassment. Would be a bit hypocritical if he had a problem with it, now wouldn't it? Kirishima's mother lets them go upstairs after she promises Kirishima to bring them some snacks to fuel their brain activity with a laugh. Bakugou lets some of the tension leave his shoulders and relaxes his hypervigilance slightly when she goes. They head up to Kirishima's room, which can only be described as red. Red and unbelievably messy. Bakugou hates it. He can feel the itch underneath his skin, the crawling feeling of mess and dirt and filth, and he forces himself not to immediately start cleaning Kirishima's room. That would definitely come off as strange. He's surprised his room is allowed to be so messy. At home, if Bakugou's room is anything less than spotless, if the house is anything less than spotless, really, seeing as he's nothing more than an unpaid servant to his hag of a mother, he'd get the sit kicked out of him. Kirishima's mother seems nice though. Bakugou feels that familiar ache, the one he always used to get watching Deku being picked up from school by his mother, how he'd run into her arms and she'd pick him up and spin him around and ask him how his day was. And Bakugou would be left walking home alone to a house that hadn't heard laughter in a long, long time. He eventually identified the ache as jealousy. He was jealous of useless, pathetic Deku. Jealous because Deku's mother loved him. She didn't hit him, or scream at him, or throw things at him. And, deep down, he was jealous because he knew that Inko Midoriya would not have let what his dad did to him happen to Deku. He knew that she wouldn't have stood in the doorway and watched like his mother did, wouldn't have ignored him asking her to help him for the first and last time in his life. And that hurt. It ached. And Bakugou was jealous. Bakugou watched Kirishima scribbling frantically into his notebook, trying to solve the problem with Bakugou's explanation still fresh in his mind, and wondered, again, what Kirishima was getting out of their friendship. It's not like Kirishima could possibly like being around him. Bakugou had carefully cultivated a personality reminiscent of a mile-high wolf topped with barbed wire ever since he'd learned that anger was fantastic at concealing fear. "Oi, Kirishima," he said, heart-beating bruises against his chest when Kirishima looked up from his work at his words. "Yeah, Baku bro, what's up?" he asked, and Bakugou almost didn't want to ask. Didn't want this to end. Didn't want the strange warmth that Kirishima gave him to drain out of him, leave him empty and filled with hollow anger once again. But he had to know. "Why do you put up with me? What are you getting out of this friendship?" Kirishima just looked at Bakugou with naked shock, and Bakugou narrowed his eyes in suspicion. He'd never pegged Kirishima as a good liar or an actor, but clearly he was wrong. The surprise and confusion on his face almost looked genuine. "Bakugou, buddy, do you not know how being friends works?" Bakugou bristled. "I don't want anything from you, Bakugou. Just your company, man. Friendship isn't about what the other person can give you. I'm not trying to use you or anything." Bakugou was confused. He hated being confused. "Are you lying to me, City Hair? 'Cause I'll F King beat your butt if you are." "No, Bakugou. I'd never lie to you. Never. I'm not that kinda guy, Kirishima exclaimed. And Bakugou. Bakugou wanted to believe him. He really did. But if Bakugou had learned anything, it was that if something seems too good to be true, then it's probably fake. You don't believe me, do you, man? Kirishima asked, and he almost sounded sad. Why? Not really, Bakugou said plainly, and, as Kirishima's face fell, felt the strange urge to apologize bubbling up inside him. What the FCK? Here, man, how about this, Kirishima said with renewed vigor, and held out his outstretched pinky finger to Bakugou. I'll pinky promise never to lie to you, and you'll pinky promise to try and believe that we're proper friends. Bakugou was, once again, really confused. He was getting real sick of it. The FCK's a pinky promise, city hair? He asked impatiently, and Kirishima's face fell again. Well, it's basically just a promise between friends that you're not allowed to break. Bakugou stared at Kirishima's hand for a couple seconds longer, almost unconsciously noting how big it was, and how tan the skin of his hands was compared to Bakugou's, and then, before he could overthink it, locked his pinky finger around Kirishima's. Okay, now what? Kirishima beamed. I pinky promise never to lie to you. Bakugou huffed, and then muttered, I pinky promise to believe that we're friends. Their pinkies stayed curled around each other for a second longer before Bakugou pulled his hand away abruptly and yelled at Kirishima to get back to work. Bakugou would rather die than admit that he missed the warmth. Being friends with Kirishima apparently meant being friends with the entire band of idiots that hung around him too. Raccoon Eyes, Pikachu, and Soy Sauce Face. It wasn't that Bakugou didn't like them, they were friends with Kirishima, so of course they were just as smiley and kind as him, except Pikachu, who seemed to take great pleasure in pushing Bakugou as far as he could before backing off, but they were unbelievably loud. While that was good for his ears, he didn't have to rely on his shoddy lip reading when they were talking, unlike Deku and his mumbling, it was terrible for his head. What with his quirk being bright lights and deafening noise, it was basically a walking migraine trigger, so Bakugou was very susceptible to headaches. He'd been getting a FCK ton of them lately. And once again, here they were, Kirishima having coaxed Bakugou into the cafeteria, screaming as loudly as a pack of howler monkeys, and Bakugou's head was pounding. Shut the FCK up, Bakugou hissed tightly, digging his fingers into his temples and trying to beat back the symptoms of an oncoming migraine by sheer force of will. Their noise quieted for about 3 seconds before Kirishima spoke quietly, Thank God, do you have a headache, Bakubro? Bakugou gritted his teeth, unwilling to admit the weakness, but just as unwilling to have to suffer through a city migraine just because he wasn't able to give a reason for these idiots to shut the hell up. Yes, he spat, clenching his eyes shut and swearing that if anyone in this merry band of dumbasses dared to pity him he'd kick their butt into next week. Blasty, you should drink some water, man, from Pikachu, pushing a cup across the table. You want to head to an empty classroom, then? From Soy Sauce Face. We'll shut up now, Baku, sorry. From Raccoon Eyes. Bakugou fumed, raising his head and glaring at them even as the light shot signals of agony into his brain. I don't need your pity, he snarled, and the three backed up in shock at the vitriol in his voice. He saw them glancing at his tight fists, the rigid set of his shoulders, and the undoubted paleness of his face, and prepared for more platitudes. It's not pity, Blasty, we just want to help. It's like when the boys buy me chocolate or give me hot water bottles for my PRD cramps, Baku. They don't pity me, they just understand that it hurts, said Raccoon Eyes, and Bakugou had to admit, grudgingly, that did make a bit of sense. Fkin fine, let's go to a Fkin classroom, Bakugou said, and then promptly swayed when he stood, as the throbbing pain of a regular headache turned into the stabbing pain of an oncoming migraine. Sit, he hissed, grabbing his head and pressing like that would do anything at all. Kirishima placed a steadying hand on his shoulder and led him out of the cafeteria, and Bakugou didn't even take his hands away from his head to swat away the contact. He felt like his pressing hands were somehow keeping the pain contained, and if he let go, it would become unbearable. The further they left the sounds of the cafeteria behind, the more Bakugou became aware of his own pained, harsh breathing, and he tried to quiet it down. He felt himself being led into an empty classroom, and he immediately stumbled to the nearest wall and pressed his aching forehead into the cool concrete. It only offered the barest of reliefs. Vaguely, he heard hushed voices behind him, but the pain had built to such a level that even thinking was agonizing. He thought he remembered the whole idiot brigade escorting him out of the cafeteria. Bakugou had yet to open his eyes, but when the BLD red of his eyelids darkened, he figured someone had turned off the lights. He opened them the barest amount, and made out a figure crouching in front of him. Wait, when had he slid down the wall onto the floor? With bright red hair. Kirishima, Bakugou whispered, as softly as he could, and even that hurt, don't let anyone come in. Can't see me like this. Weak. He heard Kirishima mutter angrily under his breath, but his hearing couldn't pick it up. Then he said quietly, don't worry, Bakubro, Sero and Kaminari are watching the door. Mina has some water for you, do you think you can drink it? Bakugou's stomach roiled with nausea at the suggestion, and he shook his head weakly, regretting it almost immediately as he gripped his head again with what he refused to admit was a whimper when the action made his brain rattle around his skull, sending fresh waves of pain to his overstimulated nerves. He lowered himself further until he was lying on the ground, and pressed his naturally warm hand to the cold floor, and once it felt sufficiently cold, held his forehead with it. He could feel himself making little noises of pain every time he so much as moved, and he was sweating dangerous buckets, but he couldn't stop himself from doing either thing. He prayed that the migraine would abate enough for him to be able to sleep. After rest, most of the pain was usually gone. For now, though, he was forced to shiver on the ground with pain setting every nerve ending in his eyes and his head on fire, all too aware of the presence of 4 other people in the room while he was completely defenseless. Vulnerable. If, at this moment, one of them tried anything, Bakugou would be near helpless. After one terrible occasion when he was 11, no one had ever been there for his migraines. They made him weak. His father had taken advantage of that, taking pleasure in Bakugou's inability to struggle lest it hurt even more, and coaxed more pain noises out of him that were not due to the agony in his head. That had been without a doubt one of the worst days of his life, and after that he'd barricade himself in his room if he felt a migraine coming on. But now he wasn't alone. Strangely, though, he didn't really think they would use his vulnerability to their advantage. The fear was there, it always was, but it felt more irrational than anything. As Bakugou trembled on the ground, trying to cool down his hand with the floor, a foreign hand, blissfully cold, settled on his forehead. He flinched away first, but then admitted defeat, and lifted his own weak hand to press the foreign one tighter to his head. God, it hurt so badly. He hated migraines. It took hours, but the migraine eventually receded, without Bakugou falling unconscious even once. He was even pricklier than usual now, what with the still lingering pain in his head fanning the flames of his anger. The FCK, do you mean we missed afternoon classes? You should have told me and made me go. FCK. Bakugou, said Kirishima, an expression of mild horror on his face, you were in so much pain. You can't honestly believe that we'd make you go to class when you had a migraine? The others were all standing behind him, similar expressions on their faces, nodding emphatically. Bakugou just growled. He knew they were right, he had been in no state to learn, but still. His mother was going to be so angry. Why the FCK didn't you go then? The mild horror on all their faces intensified. We weren't just going to leave you, cried Raccoon Eyes. Why the FCK not? The horror intensified again. Bakugou, we're your friends. We were worried about you. We weren't going to leave you to suffer alone, said Kirishima gently. Bakugou was angry again. I told you I don't need your F-King pity. He spat, shaking with rage and the still unused relaxation of muscles previously tense in agony. Kirishima stepped forward, holding out his pinky finger. Bakugou glared at him. The others stared. Kirishima linked their fingers and said, Bakugou, I promise you that we don't pity you. Friends look after friends when they're hurt. Bakugou stared into Kirishima's open expression and found himself believing him. "Fine," he muttered, shoving past the idiots standing at the door. "See you nerds tomorrow." "Bye, Baku bro." As he stomped away, Bakugou could hear them all talking excitedly and managed to pick out one thing: he wants to see us tomorrow. Against his better judgment, Bakugou found a smile pulling at the corners of his mouth. What idiots! The ping of his phone pulled his attention away. Some older notifications from his mother, increasingly angry texts telling him to get his pathetic home right now or she'd not let him inside, and one notification he didn't recognize. He swiped it and found himself staring at an alert. "Kirishima, City Hair, has added you to the chat. Bakusquad 1723 Red Riot, welcome Baku bro. Alien Queen, hey Blasty. 1. Pika yo kakin off-brand Spider-Man, sup Bakugou, welcome to the group chat." The ghost of a smile became a real one, and Bakugou felt more of that traitorous warmth swooping in to fill the hollow inside his chest. What idiots! You are broken on the floor and you're crying. He has done this all before, but you're lying broken. Isaac Danielson. Bakugou could never really remember how many times it happened. When he looked back on his childhood, it was all very blurry, and trying to recall individual events was more difficult than it probably should be. It was kind of like when you pressed fast forward on a movie, and you watched all the events speed past you, and then whenever you let it play it was only for the duration of a single scene, a single memory, before everything sped up and became blurry again. Bakugou was strong-pressed to remember anything nice. Most of the time he didn't know if that was because his memory was apparently faulty, or if there had just never been any good moments in his life to remember. He was inclined to believe the latter, as much as it made him feel like a baby to admit, but his memory was only weird, not bad. If he tried, he could remember events easily. He just never really knew where they fit in his personal timeline. Or how old he was in them. Or any context for them. So while Bakugou knew for an absolute fact that the first time his dad touched him was when he was 8 years old and in December, because he remembered being cold, he didn't know how many times it had happened since, or how old he was when things progressed. He just knew it happened often, and got worse as he got older. The stronger Bakugou got, the more his body matured, the more muscles he gained in his legs and his arms from his strict training regimen, the more his father delighted in making him feel weak. It never got any easier, as such, just that Bakugou got used to it. Because, more often than not, his dad followed a certain routine. Bakugou's mother had taken his bedroom door off its hinges a long time ago, so Bakugou didn't even have that as some sort of flimsy protection that, he knew, would have amounted to absolutely nothing anyway when faced with his father's soft words and calloused hands. So it didn't matter that much. Except that it did, because he just felt vulnerable and paranoid and weak all the time. Like now. Because, like some kind of danger radar in Bakugou's brain, he just knew that his dad would be exerting some of his energy today. With Bakugou. His mother was out, he'd gotten home from school to an empty house, and was now working on his homework, when really, he was staring at the clock and wishing he had a quirk that could stop time. The clock hit 5:30, the front door swung open, and Bakugou shuddered. Tried to pretend that he'd heard nothing, that he didn't know what this meant. He kept mindlessly writing down the English notes from present mix class, steadfastly ignoring the noise in the kitchen downstairs, and then the slow, heavy, familiar footsteps of his father coming up the stairs. He kept ignoring him when he saw his shadow on the carpet of his bedroom, when his father placed the cup of hot chocolate on his desk, and sat down on Bakugou's bed, right beside him. Bakugou couldn't ignore him any longer. He drank the hot chocolate like he knew he was meant to, though it tasted like ash in his mouth, and pretended the hot, intent gaze of his father on his throat as he swallowed didn't want to make him throw up all over his English homework. The false peace only lasted as long as it took Bakugou to finish the hot chocolate, so he made it last as long as possible. The warning hand his father set on his thigh had him draining it quickly. Trying his father's patience was never a very good idea. Kit Kat, his father murmured, and Bakugou knew he was out of time. Heartbeat jackrabbiting in his chest, he turned to his father, avoiding looking him in the eyes because he didn't think he could take seeing the lust in them today. He was so tired, and a headache was pulsing behind his eyes, and he just wanted to sleep for a long time. Maybe never, ever wake up. He didn't want this. He never wanted this. But, Bakugou thought, feeling his father's chapped, dry lips forcing his own open to slip his tongue inside his mouth, what he wanted had never, ever mattered before. Why should it be any different now? It hurt. It hurt so badly. It hurt like nothing else ever had, and all Bakugou could do was grit his teeth and clench the sheets beneath him. Despite his best efforts, involuntary, pained sounds were punched out of him in the same rhythm as his father's slamming hips. Bakugou felt his head be pushed deeper into the mattress, cutting off his breathing, and blind panic briefly overrode his agony. He couldn't breathe, and he was suffocating, and was it his own pillow he was struggling against or a villain made of sludge? He didn't know, and everything hurt, and his fists were sore from how tightly he was clenching them, and his lip was bleeding where he was biting it so he wouldn't cry out, and wasn't his father finished yet? He felt hot tears trail down his cheeks, staining the pillow, and he hated himself. He hated himself so much. His father leaned over him, pressing himself against Bakugou's back, and used his larger frame to flatten him onto the bed. Somehow, it hurt so much worse, and Bakugou could not hold back his whimper when his father bit down HRD on his neck and whispered in his ear. For once in his life, Bakugou wished he was deaf, not just strong of hearing, because he heard the words his father said perfectly clearly. So f-king tight, Kit Kat, FCK such a slap for me, yet you f-king love this, don't f-king light his father only ever swore when he was inside Bakugou, and that just made what he said so much worse. FCK, when was it going to be over? Bakugou had practically bitten through his lip at this point, and the pain was just getting worse, and he really didn't want to cry out, because his father liked it when he did that. But then, his father lifted himself up again, pushed Bakugou's back down and his hips up into an uncomfortable arch that had more traitorous tears pricking Bakugou's eyes. And then he snaked a hand around Bakugou's throat. Bakugou couldn't breathe. The panic snared itself around his heart, stabbed at his lungs, and Bakugou's mind went white. Then his father squeezed, cutting off his air supply. Bakugou only distantly registered the wailing cry that suddenly started up as his father's pace increased again, using the chokehold on his neck as leverage. It took him a moment to realize that he was the one wailing like that, crying out like some animal caught in a trap, but he physically couldn't stop himself. He was so scared and it hurt so bad and he couldn't breathe, and was he going to die? Maybe that wouldn't be so bad. The thought scares him, but it's true. At least in death he wouldn't feel this pain anymore, right? He wouldn't feel this shame, this fear, this helpless, hollow anger that does nothing to protect him when it really matters. Or maybe he would. Maybe he'd never find peace, not even in death. Maybe he deserved that. His father grunts behind him, and Bakugou knows that means the end is in sight, but his heart and voice don't seem to get the message, and he still wails and his heart beats so fast he thinks he might pass out, and is that black at the corners of his vision? The panic is so all-consuming that Bakugou only registers the glint of metal in his peripheral vision when his father is already dragging the compass down his back. His wail turns to a shriek, and Bakugou succumbs to the panic. He struggles, weakly in his terror, but struggles nonetheless, for the first time, and his father responds with a harsh, "Shut up, Katsuki," and Bakugou tries. He really does. But the pain is just so much, and now there's the new agony on his back, and he can feel the BLD dripping down his sides and onto his white sheets, and he can't stop screaming. He's screaming words too, and that almost hits him harder than anything else. He's never begged. Never asked his father to stop, to slow down. Never given him the satisfaction. But it appears that his father found his breaking point, because Bakugou is begging in between cut-off screams that the loosened chokehold allows. "Please, please, Stu stop, please, it hurts so, oh bad, please Stu op, please." His father doesn't, just digs the compass deeper, and Bakugou wheezes in pain instead of begging more, and wishes he were dead. He doesn't understand. His mother was always the violent one, the one who liked to hurt him, and his father was usually gentle. He thought he'd hated that, being treated like a willing lover, but now he knows how foolish he was. He'd give anything to have that back. Anything. His father grips his neck tighter again, slashes the compass over his shoulders one more time, and comes with a low groan. Bakugou passes out. When Bakugou wakes up, he's alone, like every time. He's also in pain, but it's different this time. Worse. He drags himself out of bed and limps to the bathroom, ignoring the bile rising in his throat at the feeling of something wet trickling down his thighs. He doesn't look at the mirror in the bathroom and steps straight into the shower instead. He hisses and clenches his aching fists when the hot water cascades down, washing his back of BLD and simultaneously reopening whatever cuts his father had made that had already clotted over. He watches distantly as the red of his BLD dilutes in the water before disappearing down the drain, and reluctantly parts his legs to wash in between them. His stomach is roiling, and he needs to get everything out of him, now. It hurts when he uses his fingers to hurry the process along, and Bakugou knows, with a sense of resigned dread, that he'll have to avoid solid foods for a while. It's utterly humiliating, but anything is better than crying on the toilet because it hurts like it's still happening whenever you try to go. He spends a long time in the shower, because when he's in the shower he's clean and safe and warm, and the minute he leaves he knows he'll feel the dirt settling under his skin once again. Eventually, he gets out, drying himself off and staining the towel red. Laundry day it is, then. He gets his bandages from the cupboard, and realizes this is the first time he's using them because of his father. His mother has made him bleed plenty of times, and he himself has even her beat in inflicting damage on himself. He stares absent-mindedly at the burn scars on his thighs, the uniform, raised pink lines on his hips, and unrolls the bandages. His father's first time making him bleed. Well, not technically, but still. There's something ironic about that, Bakugou thinks, and he laughs quietly, turning to the mirror. The laughter withers and dies in his throat. Around Bakugou's neck is an unmistakable dark purple handprint that he has no idea how he's going to hide. When he cranes his neck to look at his back, something inside him cracks wide open and falls. Deep, jagged slashes across his shoulder blades that probably need stitches, but that he can't in any way reach are the first thing he sees. The next thing is worse. In the middle of his back, his father has cut a word into the skin. Bakugou stares at it for a long, long moment, then he bends forwards and throws up into the sink. He chokes on the acid burning his throat and pretends the tears in his eyes are from the pain of vomiting instead of the shame at what his father has done. Because he's branded him. Claimed him. Scarred him. FCK. He wraps the bandages around his torso tightly, red specks of BLD bleeding through before too long, and tries to forget about it. He washes out his mouth, puts on his softest pajamas, they have cats on them, Bakugou's favorite animal, and goes back to his room. It smells of SEC and BLD and sweat. Bakugou gags, his empty stomach trying to throw up again, and he opens his window wide, shivering at the cold air blowing in. He changes the sheets on his bed, dumping the dirty ones with his stained towel to be dealt with tomorrow, and burrows underneath the covers, hugging his teddy close. He thinks he wants to cry, maybe, but it's like he's run out of tears. He just feels unbelievably alone. Bakugou buries his nose in his teddy's soft fur, breathing in the scent of what his younger self would have called love and teddy smell in the privacy of his own mind, brings up a still shaking hand to cradle his bruised throat, and closes his eyes. Maybe he'll die in his sleep. That would be nice. Even though Bakugou expects the stares in school the next day, that doesn't make it any easier to be on the receiving end of them. He debated for a long time that morning what would be more conspicuous, a bandaged throat or an obviously bruised one. He chose the bandages to hopefully avoid more intrusive questions. Why are you wearing bandages? Is easier to lie about than where did you get that bruise? But he forgot just how much he hated things around his neck. It's fine though. He's fine. He's fine. He walks into class, early as usual, with only 4 eyes beating him there today. He sneers at him, daring him to say something, and sits down at his desk, getting out the homework he'd been forced to leave unfinished and doing it in the time he has before class starts. While he's working, everyone else files in, and he steadfastly ignores their curious eyes on him. Class begins, and Bakugou focuses, pushing his discomfort at the bandages around his neck to the back of his mind. At lunch, of course, he gets ambushed by the Bakusquad, who crowd around him with worried eyes when he tries to leave the classroom. "Baku babe, what's up with your neck?" asks Ashido, and Bakugou finds himself briefly stunned at how close he's allowed them, but quickly finds his footing again and shoots them all a glare. "None of your DMN business," he spits, and tries to communicate "I'll tear you limb from limb if you keep pushing this" with just his eyes as best he can. The message seems to reach them, though, because they drop it with only a few more concerned looks, and Kirishima throws an arm over his shoulders when they walk to the cafeteria. Bakugou's back twinges and burns with pain, but he doesn't move Kirishima's arm off him. He likes the touch, the closeness. Not for the first time he wishes he were less himself. His teddy is a decent substitute, but he's found himself wondering more and more lately how it would feel if Kirishima wrapped him in a hug, held him with those strong, warm arms, supported him like he always seemed to do. He bets that Kirishima is good at hugs. He bets that he would feel safe in his arms. He wishes he knew how to ask for one, or act in a way that invites one. Better yet, he wishes he remembered what a hug even felt like. That's one memory he's never managed to find in the blurry slideshow that is his life. People in pain are often faced with the choice: destroy yourself or destroy others. There is no right answer. Bakugou hadn't known what to expect from the internships, in all honesty. After the sports festival, Bakugou had mostly gotten offers from brute force heroes that were clearly more brawn than brains, and he'd found that vaguely offensive. Sure, if that was your style, but Bakugou prided himself on his creativity. His quirk screamed power, but Bakugou had driven himself into the ground, making it more than that. He'd wanted to be versatile, flexible, and clever with the way he approached heroism. He'd hoped that even a single hero would notice the fact that he hadn't used the same tactics twice in the individual fights. He'd come at everyone differently, showed off what he thought were superior tactics. Hell, he'd figured out Birdbrain's weakness and used it against him to win in the 4-minute fight they'd had. It hurt him, just a little bit, that no one seemed to see that. They took one look at him and thought power and not much else. Then Bakugou saw Best Jeanist's internship offer. Putting aside the fact that he was the number 4 hero, which clearly showed he was dedicated enough to respect his fighting style, was something Bakugou had researched. It was inventive and unique, things Bakugou worked strong to be. He'd gone into this thinking he might actually enjoy it. His mother had sent him off with a harsh jab to the stomach and a hissed "better be good, brat, or I'll teach you a lesson" in front of his whole agency, and his father had placed a hand on his still wounded shoulder and said, "You'll do great, Kit Kat. My little hero." And Bakugou had wanted to scream. But he didn't. He left and made his own way to the train station, ignoring the pang in his chest when he saw that Deka's mother had brought him and was hugging him goodbye with tears in her eyes. He didn't care. At least the bruises on his neck had healed enough that they could be covered with concealer instead of bandages. "To be honest, I don't like you," was the first thing Best Jeanist said to him. "What the FCK?" Bakugou stood there in shock as Best Jeanist continued talking at him rather than to him, and felt the anger steadily rising inside him, making his hands shake and his vision tinge red. He only caught snippets of what the man said, but it was enough to make his heart sink in disappointment. Aggressive, that display in the sports festival, clearly violent nature, and I can almost guarantee that the only reason you accepted my internship offer was because of the fact that I am the number 4 hero, Best Jeanist said, looking down on Bakugou. "You requested me," Bakugou said through gritted teeth, stepping forward, before suddenly being unable to move a muscle. FCK. Bakugou fought against the instinctive panic at being immobile and helpless, and realized that Best Jeanist had restrained him. His brain was stuck between overwhelming anger and bone-deep terror. Naturally, he went for the anger, and fumed silently, pointedly not listening to whatever the hell the man was prattling on about now, waiting to be released. He's starting to regret his decision. And to think he had the nerve to hope that Best Jeanist had seen something in him. To think he dared to look forward to this. To think he had the audacity to think that maybe, just maybe, someone had finally seen past his surface-level power and recognized the strong work underneath. Bakugou almost laughed derisively at himself. He'd had 16 years to learn that no one else ever bothered to give him a second glance. He'd cultivated himself to provoke that exact reaction, after all, afraid of concerned eyes and prying questions. But he hadn't expected it to work quite so well. He hadn't expected his defensive anger would leave him quite so lonely. He knew it was totally his fault he had no one because he trusted no one. Maybe Kirishima was worming his way in, but that was between Bakugou and the Almighty Lord, wasn't it? It had been ridiculous to think that maybe Best Jeanist had given him that second glance. He just saw what everyone else did. And while it hurt like it always did, hurt in a way he'd never admit, Bakugou was quite used to this kind of reaction. He'd deal with it, and work strong regardless. Make Best Jeanist respect his work ethic and fighting skill if he couldn't respect Bakugou himself. He was going to learn everything he could here, regardless if the hero who had taken him on only saw him as something to be fixed. It didn't matter. It didn't. It definitely f-king mattered. It was the third day of the internship and Bakugou had yet to leave the DMN agency. Best Jeanist had regaled him with a lecture on how he first had to learn proper decorum, how to speak to civilians, and, basically, how to be an actor before he'd be allowed out on patrols. It seemed to him like the hero just wanted to invert all of Bakugou's personality traits. Bakugou was frustrated and had far too much energy, and he was sick and tired of sitting around doing paperwork all day. This feeling was only exacerbated when he heard about the hero killer attack in Hosu. King Deku getting ahead of him again. How dare that city nerd? He'd never admit how much Deku improving unsettled him. The hierarchy he'd worked so strong to build was crumbling before his eyes. It was supposed to be that his parents hurt him and then he hurt Deku. It made him feel less pathetic, less weak, to have someone who was clearly beneath him. But now Deku was clawing his way up and Bakugou was scared. Because if Deku wasn't below him anymore, what did that make Bakugou? You'll be coming on patrol with me today, Bakugou. I expect behavior befitting a UA student from you, and I hope you will prove to me that you have the correct attitude for heroism. Bakugou was so relieved to hear he wouldn't be doing more paperwork that he let the thinly veiled insult go straight over his head. He didn't want to lose his chance to do actual hero work. But first, of course, we must make sure you look the part of a hero that people can trust, Best Jeanist said, and before Bakugou could even ask what the hell he meant, threads were restraining him and pinning him into a chair. He knew struggling was futile, but he did it anyway. FCK. He hated this internship so much. Best Jeanist attacked his hair with gel and a comb, and tugged ruthlessly at the blonde strands, trying to force them to lie flat. It hurt, and Bakugou was doing his level best to remember that he was in the number 4 Heroes Agency and not in his father's bed. The distinctly male voice behind him and the hand pulling at his hair made it difficult. He wanted to scream at the man to stop, but he didn't want to have to explain why. He'd just seem weak in front of a pro hero. Even if the pro hero in question was a bit of a DCK, Bakugou still didn't want to embarrass himself in front of him. He dug his nails into his palms until he felt warm BLD drip down his palm and focused on the stinging pain in his hand instead of the pain in his scalp. It only worked a little bit. Bakugou teetered on the knife's edge of panic attack for close to half an hour before Best Jeanist finally deemed his hair presentable. He was exhausted, and despite how excited he'd been for it, patrolling sounded even more tiring right now, when all Bakugou wanted to do was sleep. Maybe forever. The day only got worse from there. Somehow. Bakugou was forced into skin-tight jeans that made him want to blow something up. They were restrictive and touched his skin everywhere. He hated it. His stupid brain seemed to think that at any moment the denim would become sludge and envelop him, suffocate him, once again. On patrol, Bakugou was borderline paranoid. His nerves were razor-thin after the panic-inducing morning he'd had, and he physically couldn't stop himself from flinching away every time he brushed against someone on the street. He knew Best Jeanist was looking at him strangely because of it, but he couldn't do anything about it. Touch and bodily contact, no matter how slight, was just not on the cards today. And then those three ignorant brats had decided that today of all days was the perfect time to bring up the perhaps worst day of Bakugou's entire, very city, life. Yeah, he got caught by this slimy villain and he was crying like a baby. Laughed one of the kids, and Bakugou felt the icy shame settling in his stomach. What the FCK did they know? He told himself it didn't matter, but it did. As he yelled some bullshit excuse at the kids until they cried, his mind was consumed with one truly terrifying thought. Does everyone see me as a victim? Bakugou wasn't allowed back out on patrol again after that day. Best Jeanist insisted on doing his hair every day regardless though, and by the end of the week Bakugou's nerves were shot to hell and his body was heavy with exhaustion. He'd gotten absolutely nothing out of this internship. Nothing at all. Just panic and criticism that was the furthest thing from constructive. He should have just stayed at home. As Bakugou was leaving, Best Jeanist said to him, in lieu of a goodbye, "I hope you will take my lessons to heart. You are welcome to return here for your next internship, Bakugou." Not a chance in hell was he coming back. His parents weren't bothered to pick him up, which was unsurprising, so Bakugou took the train again. When he got home, the house was dark and empty. Thank God for small miracles. Bakugou threw himself on his bed and prayed that he hadn't been left too far behind the others. He'd do whatever it took to catch up and surpass everyone else. He was going to be number one. The best. The indisputable best. It didn't matter that no one seemed to believe that. Bakugou would prove them all wrong. The first morning before school, Bakugou was dismayed to discover that his hair was stuck in the hairstyle Best Jeanist had forced onto him. No matter what he did, it wouldn't budge. When he got into class, Soy Sauceface and Pikachu made it their personal goal to annoy the gel right out of his hair. "Hey pretty boy. Nice hair. Looking good there." When Bakugou got embarrassed and started shouting at them, his hair puffed back up. How strange. At least now he could attack those idiots now that their ammunition had resolved itself. Bakugou refused to linger on how much lighter he felt now that he was back among the idiots that called themselves his friends. He didn't care about them. At all. Bakugou wanted to kill Deku. And while most people wouldn't see that as out of the ordinary, it really was a lot more serious than Bakugou would have you believe. See, Bakugou didn't really hate Deku. His feelings towards him were a complicated tangle of jealousy and fear and annoyance and stuff he couldn't even name. But hate had never been a part of that. Now, though, watching Deku use his moves to stay in the lead of the race, using the moves that he'd trained for days to develop, shamelessly stealing the moves he'd literally bled for, he thought that maybe he should reconsider. How dare he? How dare he? Bakugou had been working to become a hero since he knew what the DMN word meant. He'd run until he passed out, practiced flips until he physically couldn't move, stretched until every muscle was aching, trained until he threw up. He hadn't deviated from the strict diet he'd set himself since he was 6. He'd poured everything he was into his goal. And Deku had coasted along, dreaming, scribbling in his notebook, using his quirklessness as the sole reason he couldn't become a hero. To be fair to Deku, Bakugou hadn't exactly ever told him any different, but right now Bakugou didn't have it in him to be fair to Deku. He was just angry. He'd probably never gone to the gym in his life before those last 6 months of middle school when he'd started bulking up, when Bakugou was there every day working himself into the ground since he was physically capable of using the equipment. And now Deku was stealing his moves. Using them so casually, so easily, like Bakugou hadn't spent so long thinking about them, practicing them until they were perfect. Deku was stealing his strong work. Bakugou suddenly felt vaguely sick. If it had taken Bakugou weeks of strong work to refine and perfect these moves and Deku had stolen them with an ease that made him burn. What did that say about Bakugou? Was all that work for nothing? If he could be so easily copied, and by Deku no less. Bakugou wanted nothing more than to sink into the ground in shame. He couldn't even feel any vindictive glee when Deku fell, and soy sauce won instead. The damage had been done. Those moves were Bakugou's, but now, they were Deku's. Bakugou felt irrational, unmoored. Deku had everything. He didn't need to take this from Bakugou too. Deku had a mother who loved him, friends who admired him, teachers that respected him, the attention of All Might, and what did Bakugou have? A powerful quirk, a need to be the best, and a shield of anger that he couldn't remember how to lower. No one saw anything else, and if he was honest, Bakugou couldn't remember what else there was. He just felt empty. He knew that Deku had struggled too, he knew that, a lot of it was at his own hand, but he couldn't think about that right now. It was easier to be angry at Deku. But he was so tired of being angry, Bakugou wanted, with startling clarity, and with more conviction than he'd ever had, to die. He hadn't been living for himself for a long time. He was living to prove everyone wrong. To prove that he could become the best. And he knew how childish it sounded, but he hadn't thought it would be so strong. He just needed, Bakugou didn't even know what he wanted anymore. To have the pain stop, maybe. To be strong enough, perfect enough, that he'd never get hurt again. But that goal seemed so far away all of a sudden. He just wasn't good enough for anything. Was he even good enough to be number one? It's a lot easier to be angry at someone than it is to tell them you're hurt. A week-long training camp in the mountains, far away from civilization, sounded like heaven to Bakugou right now. His parents had shown him over the past few weeks that no matter how bad he thought it was, it could always get worse. Apparently the hag and best genius knew each other, so she called him to ask how Bakugou had behaved during the internship. Knowing the pro hero, he tried his best to be professional, but had really just given his mother priceless ammunition to load into her well-used verbal gun. Bakugou had heard her calling him, but his hearing hadn't let him catch more than a few words from where he had his better ear pressed firmly to his bedroom floor to eavesdrop on his mother in the kitchen. He felt absolutely no shame for this, considering the fact they were talking about him, but he hadn't gleaned anything of use. For probably the 100th time, Bakugou wished his parents would let him get hearing aids. His mother had told him they were a visual sign of his weakness, and Bakugou agreed, but wasn't being able to hear better than appearing strong? Hearing properly would allow him to actually be stronger. He'd thought about it a lot, prepared logical arguments to present his mother with, actually managed not to get irrationally angry when asking her, to no avail. She insisted it would make him look pathetic and that she wasn't going to waste money on something normal kids were able to do. That had stung in a different way to most of the things she said. Was being strong of hearing so abnormal? After the phone call, Bakugou had expected retaliation, but even for his mother he considered it excessive. She'd stormed into his room, grabbed him by the wrist and dragged him downstairs. "You're a disappointment, Katsuki. You embarrassed me and your father in front of a fashion design hero. How dare you?" Bakugou had barely opened his mouth to call her a hag before she pulled something out of the cupboard that made it snap shut again. "Should take a page out of Yue's book when it comes to controlling you, King brat." Brandishing a muzzle that looked eerily similar to the one Yue had used at the sports festival, she advanced on him, cruel glint in her red eyes, so similar to his own. Bakugou had backed up until he hit the wall, fight or flight instincts both abandoning him as his brain fixated on the muzzle and froze him in place. He was barely breathing, but used what little air was in his lungs to plead with his mother, probably for the first time since he was a child. "Mama, please, not that, anything but that, please." His mother acted like he'd never spoken, and fastened the muzzle onto his face, far too tightly, tight enough that he could feel the metal already cutting into his cheeks. He stared at her, hoping to convey with his eyes how sorry he was, because in that moment, he was sorry. He would have apologized for anything if it had meant being let out of the muzzle. She just curled up her lip at him, maneuvered his hands into heavy-duty cork restraints, and shoved him into the hall closet, a punishment she hadn't used in a long time. Disgusting. The closet was too small, and when she locked the door, Bakugou was forced into a curled-up position that was already hellish for his back. It was dark. Small. Cold. Bakugou fought against the urge to claw at the muzzle, already feeling the sweat collecting at the bottom of the restraints. He hoped she wouldn't leave him in here too long, or his arms past his elbows would definitely suffer third-degree burns at least. It had happened before. She'd left him there for 3 days, and in her own words, she'd only let him out so he could look presentable for that DMN training camp I'm allowing you to go to. Bakugou wasn't one to look a gift horse in the mouth. Even though he was so hungry that when he ate for the first time after being let out, he threw up into the sink because his empty stomach couldn't handle the sudden nutrition. Even though the muzzle had been so tight that the metal had cut deep just below his cheekbones, and he kept reopening the wounds every time he opened his mouth too far. Even though his arms were so badly burned that he couldn't feel anything below his elbow for a week. His hands were still mostly numb, and everything else was on fire. But he had the training camp. He had his concealer, his burn cream, his aloe vera, his bandages, his plasters. He was going to make the training camp his beach, city mother or not. We know one of the villain's targets. A student named Kakin. / Bakugou stopped, Mandalay's message reverberating in his mind, staring out at the blue fire consuming the forest around them, and came to a shocking revelation. I did not, in fact, make this training camp my beach. Bakugou let the battle take over his mind, and put all emotions except rage on the back burner. Time to beat up some villains. 1 minute, Bakugou was behind Tokoyami, running at the back of the haphazard group. The next, he was nothing. He was nothing, but everything. Nowhere, yet everywhere. Infinitesimal. Pressure condensed inwards, building and building with the force of an explosion, and just as suddenly, the pressure burst outwards again, and Bakugou came face to face with Deku, noticeably more beat up than before, and felt a burning hand enclose his neck and drag him backwards. FCK. He'd been caught. And Deku was trying to save him again. Over his dead body. Stay back, Deku, he managed to say, before darkness rushed to fill the space of his body, and everything went black. When the darkness receded from his vision, he found himself paralyzed, body as responsive as a doll's, and hands rushed to hold him down, like so many times before. His hands were forced into cork restraints, his mouth covered with a muzzle, his limbs strapped to a chair. He would have laughed at the irony if he wasn't so terrified. By the time his body was listening to him again, he couldn't move regardless. He still fought. Bakugou never gave up. He tried to scream through the muzzle, felt the cuts rip open, threw himself against the restraints and earned himself more of them. When he slumped back, exhausted, he met the eyes, or rather, the hand of the guy standing in front of him. Bakugou Katsuki. My name is Shigaraki, and I want to offer you a place in the League of Villains, said the guy, and motioned to a different guy who was more burned scar than skin to remove his muzzle. Once it clattered to the floor, Bakugou stuck his tongue out to LCK the BLD trickling down his jaw, and relished in their shock. He spat a mouthful of BLD in front of the villain's feet and snarled at him. I'll never F-King join you. I'm going to be a hero that surpasses all might. For a blissful couple of seconds there was silence as the guy's Shigaraki's face screwed up with rage. Just as he opened his mouth, presumably to start yelling, the scarred guy started laughing. DMN kid, you've got some serious S. Bakugou stared at him. Shut up, Dobby! Snapped Shigaraki, and turned back to Bakugou, advancing a bit closer. You will join us. UA treats you like an animal, they don't think you'll be a hero, so why should you be? Join us and we can destroy hero society completely. Bakugou just looked at the guy, very carefully. Fanatics were dangerous, and this dude was the dictionary definition. No, he said, again, watching for his reaction. He was surprised when, instead of getting angrier, he seemed to stop, listen to something, and then turn to the corner of the room. Toga, find out what he's scared of and use it. He will join us. Sensei promised me. Who the FCK was Sensei? Shigaraki wasn't in charge? Before he could ask himself who Toga was, the shadow in the corner giggled, and a girl in a schoolgirl outfit jumped out, ulking her lips. Katsuki, your BLD is so pretty. Bakugou, against all logic, leaned as far away from her as he could. Something about her was setting off all his alarm bells. Her eyes, fixated on the BLD on his face, reminded him of someone. Ooh, kitty, are you scared of me? How cute! She squealed, and Bakugou growled at her. He really didn't like her. Go FCK yourself, you crazy beach. He barely got the words out before he was hit across the face with an familiar slap but an unfamiliar hand. A woman, man? Stood in front of him, hands still raised, and glared at him. Don't talk about Toga-chan like that again, you little beach. Thanks, big sis. Cried Toga from his left. A woman, then. Bakugou just side-eyed her, leaving his face turned the way the slap had left it, determining whether she was going to hit him again. When he saw that she wasn't, he whipped his head back and bared his teeth at her. My mom hits harder than that, you F-king hag. He saw the backhand coming, that time, but, in an action born out of years of practice, snapped his head back into place the moment she hit him. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the man Shigaraki called Dabi flinch almost imperceptibly at his words, before fixing him with an intense stare that he was only too happy to return with a scowl. All of you go away. I want to play with Cat for a bit, see some more of his pretty red BLD, cried Toga, and after some grumbling, they all started to leave. This definitely didn't put Bakugou on edge. Not at all. Dabi left the room last, and let his gaze sweep between Bakugou and Toga for a second, before shooting Bakugou one last glance. Now we're all alone, kitty. I wonder what scares you. Shigi told me to find it so you can be our friend. I wonder what it is. Bakugou stayed resolutely silent, ignoring her as she circled him. She danced forward and sliced through the material of his shirt into his shoulder. Bakugou bit his lip strong, and didn't make a sound. However, he was physically incapable of preventing the flinch when her small hands traced the skin of his shoulder, running her fingers over what Bakugou knew were the partially healed scars from his father. Unfortunately for him, Toga wasn't an idiot. He knew she'd seen his flinch. His bad feeling was only confirmed when he heard her high-pitched giggle next to his ear and felt her cold hands traveling over his shoulders and down past his collarbones. He knew he'd given himself away when she brushed her thumb over his NPL and he said nothing. Did nothing. Because he knew how this went. Even though he knew it was Toga and not his father, even though the hands were small and smooth and not big and calloused, he froze. His breaths became almost silent, and all his senses went into overdrive. He felt Toga behind him, heard her pleased hum at how he stiffened, felt her hands move lower. He couldn't move. Couldn't speak. He was 8 years old again, and his father was nipping a bruise onto his thin neck, and he didn't understand what was happening. He was 9, 10, 11, and he felt sickening pleasure and unfamiliar pain, and he was so confused. He was 16, Toga was wrapping her hand around him, crooning in his ear, "So cute, kitty," and all he felt was shame. When Toga was finished, or rather, when Bakugou was, she wiped her hand on the back of the chair and brought out her knives. Bakugou saw her cut him, saw her laughing as she carved into his stomach, but he barely felt it. It was like he was a passenger, an observer in his own body. Everything was gray and static and blissfully muted. The shame and the fear and the disgust that had been filling his mind only seconds before had been covered by this veil of something. This had happened to Bakugou before, when he was younger, but his father had hated him doing it, said he was like a lifeless doll, and had always forced him back into his body one way or the other. But now he wasn't being forced back in. He was hovering, only vaguely registering the sting of the knife, only vaguely hearing Shigaraki's voice as the other villains filed back into the room. He heard Shigaraki speak and process none of it. It was only when the man pointedly disintegrated a table by placing his hand on it and then lunged for him, 5 fingers outstretched, that Bakugou felt himself catapult back into his own body and flinch away as far as the restraints would let him. All at once, the pain of Toga's activities hammered against his brain, and the shame came trickling back into the hollow space inside him, and he almost heard the little boy inside him whisper, "Someone else too?" Before he shoved everything down and let anger take the stage again. He shrouded himself in the rage, his unbuttoned trousers and exposed, bleeding chest making him frantic with vulnerability. His anger was a double-edged sword, but he'd been wielding it for a long time, and the pain of it no longer bothered him so much. "The FCK do you want, you crusty a-hole?" he snapped, horrified at how hoarse his voice was. "Good, you're back. Your eyes were empty for a bit there. Like a doll." "Pretty creepy, to be honest," said Shigaraki, the glee in his voice somehow overshadowed by actual concern. "Go FCK yourself, hand Fker," Bakugou spat, but he choked on his inhale when Toga grabbed a fistful of his hair and let her hand trail down to his crotch. "Listen to Shiggy, kitty," she whispered, and Bakugou didn't dare move. Just let her pull his hair until his throat was bared, and let her bite a mark into his neck. God, he hated himself. "Toga. Leave him alone. You'll send him into a panic if you're not careful," said Dabi, watching Bakugou with curious eyes, and Bakugou immediately forced his breathing into a slower rhythm. FCK, to think he was scared enough a villain stepped in to defend him? He could barely think through the shame. "Join us, Bakugou Katsuki. No one will hurt you again, and you'll get the revenge you want," said Shigaraki, and Bakugou believed him. He believed that somehow, in some twisted way, Shigaraki thought he was helping Bakugou. Or maybe he was just batshit crazy. Both viable options. And even though Bakugou would never admit it, he considered it for a moment. Considered joining them, leaving his city parents, a school that judged him and random people who hated him behind. But then he thought of his class. His friends. How sad Kirishima would be. Kaminari, Mina, Sero. And how disappointed Aizawa would be. And then, he thought of how his parents would react. He could practically see his father's gentle smile, him saying that he'd always expected it, but hoped it wouldn't happen. His mother would laugh, he knew. Laugh, and say that she'd always known he'd turn into a villain. He considered it, just for a moment, and he knew his answer. No. Bakugou Katsuki never gave up. He hadn't slept in 3 days. Toga hadn't done more than teasingly run her hands over his chest or darken the mark on his neck, but he still froze when she came into the room. They never let him rest. Every time his eyes drooped, for fingers landed on his leg, a blade sliced into his arm, a LCK of flame danced too close to his face. They hadn't stopped their recruitment efforts either. Bakugou hoped someone was looking for him. He couldn't bear to think they weren't. And then, take off his restraints. Bakugou could not believe his ears, and almost thought his Sid hearing was playing tricks on him. But, to his shock, the walking personality disorder masquerading as a villain was crouched in front of him, undoing his restraints. He heard the villains protesting, and Shigaraki say something about him being outnumbered and outmatched. While that was undoubtedly a fact, what wasn't a fact was Shigaraki's insistence that he'd not fight them because of this. The minute the restraints were off, he exploded all the built-up sweat in his palms and sent the twice guy flying. He dropped into a crouch, facing the rest of them, marking off his possible escape routes and, "Hello. This is Pizza La, Kamino store." For a split second, both Bakugou and the villains stared at the door. Bam! All Might burst through the door, and Bakugou felt a tiny bit of tension leave his shoulders. It was going to be okay. Nothing was okay. Bakugou choked on the black mist pouring out of his mouth, trying very strong not to think of the Sludge villain, and felt himself disappear, All Might's outstretched hand blurring in his vision. When he finished coughing up the blackness, he found himself somewhere totally different, all of the villains emerging from similar dark mist around him. Wide-eyed, he watched the man in the dark suit go toe-to-toe with All Might, his aura so oppressive that Bakugou felt uneasiness settle in his stomach even from a distance away. The villains closed in on him, and Bakugou fought for his life. He dodged and evaded and sent them flying, but there were a lot of them and only one Bakugou. He didn't stop fighting, though, even as the traitorous thought of, "I'm not gonna make it," pushed to the forefront of his mind. Bakugou Katsuki never, ever gave up. He fought, watching All Might out of the corner of his eye, worrying at how the villain was more than keeping pace with him. And then Bakugou. Come. He looked up at the sound of Kirishima's voice, disbelief and shock and hope clouding his frantic mind, and saw his outstretched hand. What was he doing here? What were any of them doing here? Bakugou had no idea, but in that moment he was only embarrassingly relieved. Shigaraki made a final lunge for him, and, really, firing off twin explosions in his palms to propel him upwards had never been so easy. He was only following his friend's, his first real friend's voice. He grabbed Kirishima's hand, looked up, and said, "You stupid or something?" Elated by Shigaraki's scream of frustration from far beneath him, energized by Kirishima's sharp-toothed smile, Bakugou grinned. Everything was so far from okay, Bakugou thought. He watched All Might raise his fist in victory, heard the crowd yell. Watched All Might point, say next, "It's your turn," and saw Deku crying, and understood, suddenly, what hadn't added up about Deku's newfound quirk. He barely felt Kirishima's rough hand still holding his own tightly. He looked at All Might's frail, skinny body, and thought, nothing is okay. I did that to All Might. He was only here because of me. This is my fault. In order to grow in our ability to love ourselves, we first need to receive love. The aftermath of what was dubbed the Kamino Ward incident was devastation, plain and simple. Nomus had ravaged the city, and All Might's battle with the ominous villain who Bakugou now knew was Shigaraki's mysterious sensei, all for one, had leveled the entire surroundings. Best Jeanist was in critical condition in the hospital, people were dead and wounded, their homes destroyed, and All Might had retired. And it was all Bakugou's fault. He knew this to be fact in the same way he used to know he'd be the #1 hero. He had ended All Might's career with his weakness, his inability to prevent the villains taking him. Bakugou had been taken into the police station straight away, and he'd kept his eyes pointed downwards, away from where he could almost feel Kirishima's concern burning a hole in the side of his head. The police had sat him down in an interrogation room, and had hovered over the cuffs attached to the metal table in indecision, before taking one of Bakugou's wrists and clipping it closed around it. Bakugou didn't even have the energy to wince at the pain of it digging into his irritated skin from the cork restraints the villains had used, let alone the energy to be angry over the fact that they thought they needed to restrain him in the first place. He dug his nails into the palm of his other hand, hoping the sharp sting would wake him up enough to answer the questions the police undoubtedly had for him, but it seemed the bone-deep exhaustion stemming from 3 days of sleep deprivation could not be held off by something as juvenile as pain. You are Bakugou Katsuki, 16 years of age, currently attending UA, Sun to Mitsuki and Masaru Bakugou, is that correct? Yes, Bakugou said, horrified at how weak his voice was, the effort it took to raise it far too insurmountable an obstacle for his tired mind. Your parents are on their way here, but we have a few questions for you if that's all right, the man said. If Bakugou had the energy, he would have scoffed. As if what he wanted mattered in this situation. They'd cuffed him to the DMN table, he doubted they'd just let him leave if he didn't think it was all right. Sure, Bakugou muttered. The man asked him every question imaginable about the League of Villains. He asked them about how many members there were, what they were called, what the hierarchy seemed to be, what their quirks were, if they seemed like a real organization. Bakugou answered them all, but his brain was moving so slowly, like he was wading through thick mud, and his answers were near whispers. This did nothing to dissuade the man in front of him. Did the villains do anything to you? Hurt you physically, or blackmail you, for example? Bakugou felt his heart start to race, mind suddenly coming online again with all the urgency of a rapidly incoming steam train, and thought about what to say. He instinctively angled his head away from the man, concealing the dark, telling bruised toga had left on his neck as much as he could without RSNG suspicion. There was no way he'd say that. They wouldn't care. He knew full well how the police reacted to things like that. Unbidden, the memory of the time he'd tried to tell someone about his father surfaced in his exhausted mind. He'd walked to the police station, had asked to speak to someone, that he needed to tell them something important. A tall man with a friendly smile had taken him into a private room and asked him what was wrong. 10-year-old Bakugou hadn't known the right words to describe what his father did, and why it felt so wrong, but he'd tried his best. My dad, he touches me like he shouldn't, I don't think. And I don't like it. It's weird and it hurts a lot and, can you tell him to stop? Please? He'd looked at the man sitting across him, biting his lip nervously as he waited for him to say something. Then, the man had pulled out his phone and asked him for his dad's number. He'd given it, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips, so full of sudden and bright happiness that it hurt. The nice man was going to tell Dad to stop. And then everything would be okay again. Dad would be the nice one who hugged him when Mama was mean to him, and he wouldn't touch him anymore. Say, I have your kid here, sir, and he's claiming some wild stuff. I just wanted to check in with you and validate his story. He's saying that you touch him inappropriately, apparently? Bakugou sat, listening to the man talk on the phone, but confusion crept into the corners of his mind. Why was he asking Dad? Did he not believe Bakugou? The man laughed on the phone. Yeah, I thought as much, sir, you seem like a decent guy. Can't believe a kid of a decent man like yourself would tell such outrageous lies. Lies? No, he wasn't lying. I apologize for the inconvenience, sir. You'd better teach your boy a lesson about the dangers of making up stories like that or he'll get you in trouble. Yes, of course, I'll send him right home. No, don't thank me, sir, just doing my duty. Have a good one. Bakugou sat there in shock as the man hung up, and then turned to him with a deep frown on his face. No, boy, don't go around saying such things about your father. He seems like a good, honest man, and he doesn't deserve you making such accusations about him. No, Bakugou managed to force out around the lump in his throat. No, please, I'm not lying, I promise. Kid, you've gotta stop this. Run home now, before your father gets worried. Go on. And with that, the man left. Left the room, left Bakugou sitting there. He didn't help him. He didn't tell Dad to stop. And now Dad knew he told, and he was gonna be so mad. Bakugou sprinted out of the station, as fast as his legs could carry him, tears blurring his vision, and cursed the policeman under his breath, voice wavering. He'd never trust the police again. No one was going to help him. He'd just have to deal with it until he was an adult. Then he could leave, get away from his parents, find that policeman and beat him up, but for now, Bakugou was 10, scared out of his mind, staring at his front door and dreading what was waiting for him inside. He opened the door. The one Toga called Big Sis smacked me around a bit, and Toga likes her knives, but that's it, Bakugou said stiffly, daring the man to probe deeper. He didn't. Thank you, kid, you've been a great help. Your parents are waiting for you, so you're free to go. Bakugou muttered, the adrenaline the question had prompted already ebbing away, his body too tired to sustain his state of hypervigilance. He let the man unlock the cuff and then stumbled towards the door. Time to face his parents. In the station, his parents were all smiles and tears and relief at having their son returned. Bakugou was actually quite impressed at how genuine his mother's tears seemed. She'd even smeared her mascara to really hammer home the image of a distraught, loving mother. The moment they got into the car, her gentle grip on his arm keeping him upright turned vicious. He winced and, tired as he was, tried to shake his arm free. She only dug her nails in harder and leaned forward to hiss in his ear. You're pathetic, Katsuki. You were weak enough to get yourself kidnapped and now you've caused all kinds of trouble. You can embrace your Sid dream about becoming the #1 hero. Goodbye, brat. Bakugou only slumped, her acidic words perfectly matching his own internal monologue. Sue him for hoping that maybe his parents would actually be happy to see him. He really should stop hoping. It only hurt him in the end. The car ride was silent, tension so thick even his mother's manicured claws would have trouble tearing through it, and Bakugou kept his eyes open through sheer force of will. Once they were home, he stumbled out of the car, following his parents to the front door. God, he just wanted to lie down in his bed and sleep for a couple of decades. But when he tried to go inside, his mother shoved him away. His exhaustion, coupled with his surprise, made him fall. His mother sneered down at him, red eyes glinting with fury. You think I'll let you inside our home after how you behaved? You'll sleep outside tonight, brat, and if I'm in a good mood, I'll let you back inside in time for breakfast. Wait, the door slammed shut. Bakugou stared at it, traitorous tears pricking behind his eyes, and he curled up as small as he could, trying to conserve body heat. It wasn't particularly cold yet, and Bakugou hoped it would stay that way, but the way his day was going, it was unlikely. He lay down on the grass, and let the hot tears roll down his face, stinging the barely closed-over cuts that no one had bothered asking about, and put his hand over the mark Toga had left. He hadn't even put up a F-King fight. Maybe his mother was right. Maybe he was just a pathetic weakling. A pathetic weakling who'd ended All Might's career. With a whimper, Bakugou finally let the exhaustion wash over him, and passed out. Bakugou could hardly look at the frail, almost skeletal form of the once great hero sitting across from him. He heard Aizawa mention dorms, and had only a fleeting moment to rejoice at the prospect of freedom before his mother whacked him over the back of the head and called him weak for getting himself kidnapped. He yelled back at her, to keep up his reputation of anger, but he felt his heart sink when neither Aizawa nor All Might refuted his mother's accusation. He'd known it was true, but it still hurt, knowing his favorite teacher and favorite hero both agreed. His mother grabbed his hair, forcing him into a bow. His father's hand settled on his thigh as he bowed too, and Bakugou swallowed back the bile. His mother had just gotten back from an overseas modeling trip yesterday, and the memory of how he'd been made to assuage his father's loneliness had Bakugou wanting to shower for probably the third time today. We know Katsuki's a brat, but please train him strong and make him a good hero. Bakugou was once again utterly in awe of how good at acting his mother was. She'd really missed a calling by becoming a model. Bakugou followed the two men out, knowing he wouldn't get an answer but needing to ask anyway. All Might. What is Deku to you? Bakugou didn't look him in the eye, not wanting to face what he had done, no matter how weak it was. All Might chuckled nervously, and then said, "He is my student, just as you are." Bakugou just sighed. He'd known All Might wouldn't trust him with that kind of information, but it still managed to hurt him. He turned back to the house, towards his mother's shrieks, and pretended he didn't feel the searching gaze on his back. When the moving van came to collect the belongings Bakugou wanted to bring to the dorms, the man had been surprised at how little Bakugou had. A suitcase and a single box. Are you sure this is everything? I don't need anything else. Bakugou stood before the gates containing the impressively quickly built dorms, school bag slung over his shoulder and textbooks in his arms. He still remembered what his parents had said in lieu of a goodbye. His mother had put all her force into a smack that had nearly sent Bakugou to the floor and hissed, "You better not embarrass me any more than you already have, Katsuki." His father had slung an arm around his waist, let it drop further to cup his butt, and had whispered in his ear, "I'll come visit you in the dorms so we can spend some quality time together, Kit Kat, don't worry. I'll see you soon." Bakugou allowed a smile to cross his face. He wasn't free yet, wouldn't ever be until he became a legal adult or just ran away, an option that was getting more appealing as time went by, but this? The dorms? A room that was his own, with a door that could be locked? It was enough.